This program is brought to you by the Genesis Communications Network, a world leader in talk radio since 1998. Visit GCNlive.com today.
You're in the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
Fortunately, we have such a great guest who will probably be doing most of the talking on this episode of the Paracast that you won't have to put up with me and my head cold, which I just got like the day before. And Chris has what he calls Zuni reservation crud, which is kind of a cold too, that he gets every so often. So regardless of what you call it, we're both in less than ideal shape. But
That's a great way to have our guests be introduced on the show.
We try to be original about it. And Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum is a very special guest.
Well, I have stuffed myself full of cough suppressant and all the things that go along with having a really bad respiratory virus, actually. So, but I'm really excited, Dr. Meldrum, to have you on the show. I've been a huge fan of your work for years since you've been in the public eye. Anything that I see with your name on it has instant credibility for me. I am an experiencer. I had my own possible Bigfoot encounter. I didn't see it, but I sure heard it and smelled it. So this has been a subject that has been near and dear to my heart for many years, and I just am so honored and pleased to have you on the show. You are known for being one of the very few credentialed scientists who's been willing to say, well, wait a minute, we can't just throw this out and call hairy hominids, which are found all around the world, allegedly. We just can't call this some sort of myth or legend. There's enough evidence to suggest that this is something that science should be taking seriously, and at least not dismissing it out of hand, as many of the topics we discuss here on the Paracast are dismissed out of hand by the scientific and academic communities. I prefer to call these subjects proto-scientific subjects. So it's really an honor and a pleasure again to have you on the show. Welcome.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
To start off, Jeff, I wanted to ask you about your interests. As Chris was making clear, you're one of the few academics who tackles subjects of this nature. What attracted you to it?
Well, my background is in anatomy, but also physical anthropology. And when I'm not teaching students over a human cadaver, I'm doing research on the evolutionary adaptations of the human body for our particular mode of locomotion, that is walking on two legs. So the evolution, the timing and pattern of the adaptations associated with bipedalism have been foremost in my research interests. And so on the one hand, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest and certainly was familiar with the subject of Sasquatch, was introduced to it, and it was in 1968 when Roger Patterson came through Spokane, Washington, and showed his documentary featuring that famous film clip, 60-second film clip from Bluff Creek. But, my real involvement in this from an academic point of view came about in 96 when, so it's been, 20 years now, that I was brought up face to face with a very fresh set of footprints. And, what could be more fascinating for a student of human bipedalism than to be a direct witness to trace evidence of another bipedal primate? And so on that level, on that academic or intellectual level, it dovetails with my research interests perfectly. Perfect natural experiment if such a creature exists to better understand our own evolutionary history. But it goes without saying that the subject has this intrinsic quality to it that it's a mystery. And I've always loved the things that were lurking there on the fringes of science, of scientific knowledge, because for me, science has always been about exploration. I mean, I'm disciplined enough that I can put in the hard knocks and do the rote work in a research lab or in the field. But for me, my thrill is in exploration. I mean, it's in asking questions that have confounded the experts or have been, as you discussed, have been neglected or dismissed. It's the what if questions, and with a firm, solid footing, a basis in hard evidence. I was once confronted by a past department chairman who chided me by saying, "Well, after all, Jeff, these are just stories." And I looked at him for a moment. I said, "Well, just stories that leave footprints, that shed hair, that void scat, that vocalize, that are witnessed by credible, experienced outdoorsmen and hunters and professionals." I said, "It's a lot more than just stories." And
good comeback.
yeah. Well, for all the good it did.
Well, we'll get into this later, but I'm sure there is some blowback from expressing an interest and being public about it. It's one thing to have a private interest and have it be kind of a closet subject that you're researching. It's another thing to dovetail your work with other investigators, field people, ask for samples and be very public about it. And, I want to get into that's a whole subject in and of itself. But before we get too long down the road here, we just have a couple of minutes left for this segment. But you mentioned seeing back as a kid, seeing the Patterson Gimlin film. Where do you come down on the whether that's a legitimate piece of visual evidence or a well-executed hoax?
I'm absolutely 100%, 99.99% convinced that is absolutely legitimate. I mean, I've looked at it from so many different angles. If I had nothing but the footprints that were documented on that scene, let alone the film that shows the correlated actions of the foot of the film subject, whatever it may be in everyone's mind, I would be on that basis alone convinced. But adding to that, as I said, the depiction of the actual subject, not only the actions of the foot during those several steps, but the anatomy from head to toe. I mean, it's a fascinating exercise to just literally go through and examine the anatomy. And I do that with my students sometimes. My physical therapy students, particularly at the last day when we're having a review, as we wrap things up, sometimes I'll pop this up on the screen, and I've got a very high quality GIF of a clip of a loop of this thing, close up, very crisp, very clear. You can pick out individual muscle groups, and I'll have them do that. I'll say, now identify as much of the surface anatomy that you can observe here. And then I go even further and say, now what is there odd about the way in which it walks? Because we will have discussed the determinants of human gait, right, and some of the parameters of normal human walking. And there are very dramatic and obvious contrasts in the way this thing walks. It's not simply a man in a fur suit, and anyone who says that just doesn't have the wherewithal to evaluate it with any credibility.
Right. Plus, the actual trackway indicates an animal of considerable weight.
Right. Weight and size, exactly. And so, it's a fascinating. Here we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of that film next year, and we're still having these same conversations. A lot of work has been done. It's interesting that perennially it seems that there are skeptics who take shots at it from various quarters, and invariably it emerges even with more luster than it had previously. Many cases we're able to, with that renewed interest, we're able to go back at it with technologies that weren't available and identify details that were completely unobservable back in 1967 when Patterson made the film, but are there, and with the right technologies can be brought out, can be observed, can be understood better in ways that a hoaxer in 1967 could never have anticipated, let alone have incorporated into that piece of footage.
Let's do our break here, guys. We have Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, and we're looking at the scientific side of Bigfoot research to see what kind of answers we can achieve from it. This is going to be a real special episode, folks, so listen on with Gene and Chris. You're in
The Paracast.
Neighbors, I want to tell you about my favorite graphics app. It's the award-winning Graphic Converter. You know, Graphic Converter is the universal genius for photo editing on your Mac. Join over 1.5 million loyal users for this Swiss Army knife photo editing app. It gives you all you expect from a top-flight image editing app with tons of features, and most important, it's easy to use. It's also far less expensive than that other app that you can only get by subscription. You know the one I'm talking about. What's more, you can get 20% off with your order right now. So write this down to learn about Graphic Converter. Go to www.lemkesoft.de/Gene. Let me spell that. www.lemkesoft.de/Gene.
All right, guys, we're ready for our four-season sunroom, and Daddy's gonna get a rec room with refreshments.
Oh no, we'll be sleeping under the stars.
Mom, what about the one with, the fun?
Nice try, little bro. It's a gym. My gym.
Hey, Grandma's getting her Four Seasons garden room. Weather tight and still like being outdoors.
Maybe a living room. Oh no, wait, a family hub.
Yeah!
No matter what the budget, the season, or the climate, Four Seasons Sunrooms let you and your family enjoy the outdoors inside. Call now to hear more about these great offers from the premier manufacturer of sunrooms since 1975.
More reasons for Four Seasons now.
To find out more, call toll-free 800-848-6333. That's 800-848-6333.
Cell phones against our heads every day. But now a landmark U.S. government study confirms increased health risks from exposure to EMF radiation emitted from these devices. The time to protect yourself is now. The solution is Defender Shield. Proudly made in the USA, Defender Shield blocks virtually 100% of EMF radiation emitted from cell phones, tablets, and laptops. Buy now at DefenderShield.com. Use discount code DEFENDER for 10% off. DefenderShield.com, the worldwide leader in EMF radiation protection.
This is a life-changing message for anyone with sleep apnea who is on the go and tired of dragging around a big, bulky home CPAP device. Now there's finally a portable device that's as small as a soda can and weighs less than a pound. You can even add a battery that's as tiny as a deck of cards. It's the Transcend Mini CPAP, and if you're one of the first 100 callers, you can try Transcend risk-free for 10 days. So call now, 1-800-441-9833. Transcend is the world's first portable mini CPAP device. It gives you the freedom to sleep in total comfort anywhere you are. Our smallest and most advanced portable design ever, Transcend is so small and so light, you can fit it in your briefcase or purse to use anywhere you go. It's FAA compliant too, so you can even sleep comfortably while flying. To guarantee your 10-day in-home trial, you must be one of the first 100 callers to call minicpap.com now. 1-800-441-9833. Again, that's 1-800-441-9833.
In these uncertain times, it makes sense to have a sustainable backup method to cook food and boil water. If your current plan includes using a fuel-burning stove or cooking over an open fire, then there's a much better way. The Minuteman Rocket Stove is a biomass-burning cooking stove that only requires small quantities of sticks and twigs for fuel. The Minuteman Stove is easy to use, smokeless, portable, powerful, and sustainable. For the finest in survival cooking stoves and fire starters made right here in the USA, go to MinutemanStove.com. That's MinutemanStove.com.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our famous Paracast community forums at forum.theparacast.com.
Before we go on, we're doing a real special for the holidays for the Paracast Plus. And that is, I put up 3 episodes from our premium area to give you an idea of what it's all about. It goes back to our episode of February 28th, 2016, the 10th anniversary episode. So we have the commercial-free version. We have the After the Paracast podcast where we continue that interview. And we've got an interview from the other side of truth that Paul Kimball did with the ever-controversial Dr. Stephen Greer. It's all available from our forums. And I'll give you an idea of what we offer in the Paracast Plus, which is, of course, the commercial-free version of the show, the After the Paracast podcast, a growing video library, and lots more. And the price begins at $4.99 a month. Our price cheap. Check out plus.theparacast.com, plus.theparacast.com. We have Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum. He's a scientist who is exploring the mysteries of Bigfoot. Now, you're pointing, Jeff, to your research into how humans began to walk upright and things like that. Do we think Bigfoot is kind of maybe a lost generation of humanoid that just didn't die off?
Well, certainly. The question is where would it plug into the family tree, and how far afield would we go to include it? For me, there are basically, I think, two reasonable working hypotheses, and they're simply that. I mean, it kind of gets the cart before the horse to really expend too much energy, other than to establish a sort of a theoretical context for considering it, but about what Sasquatch is before we acknowledge that indeed it exists. But for me, there's two possibilities. One, both have been suggested by previous investigators and researchers. I think John Green was one of the first to suggest a connection with Gigantopithecus, as well as there were others back then too. But we know that this giant ape existed in Eastern Asia well into the Pleistocene, perhaps as recently as 200,000 years ago. And so in Gigantopithecus, we have something that's the right size in the right place at the right time. But others may have pointed out we only have jaws and teeth. We don't have any postcranial skeletal remains that would determine with confidence whether this creature was upright standing or not. There are things that, in my mind, tip the scales in that direction. Dr. Krantz made an argument about the angles of the bodies of the lower mandible that has been preserved, which suggests a position of the neck forward between those two halves, two sides of the jaw. And also, there are things, the shoulder of a large ape, especially one that has, any inclination to be climbing up in the trees, the shoulder's been modified in such a way that walking on all fours is a bit problematic for the joints of the wrist and the elbow and the shoulder. And this is why chimps and gorillas, one of the reasons why they've adopted this unusual knuckle walking stance and have evolved that in concert, parallel to one another almost certainly. On the other hand, some would point to bipedalism as being a very exclusive adaptation that marks the advent of the hominin radiation, our immediate ancestors and relatives since the divergence from a ancestor shared with chimpanzees, so some 7 million years ago, 6 to 7 million years ago. If that's the case, the thing that you always have to bear in mind when posing this question, and there are those out there, who advocate this is just a lost tribe of people, it's just a feral human, a Homo sapiens, and there have been some more creative hypotheses thrown out there, I guess, as well. But if we look at what is it that defines Homo, for the longest time, until quite recently, the advent of tool use was the signature characteristic of the genus Homo. That's going to have to be modified now. Just a couple of years ago, some discoveries in East Africa have shown tool marks on archaeological remains on bones dating back to a time coincident with late Australopithecines. But the point simply is, when you look at Sasquatch, there's no material culture. There's no evidence of stone tools or even modified sticks or branches that are used consistently. It's all opportunistic whacking of trees or breaking and brandishing of sticks, in a threat display. There's no evidence of home bases. There's no evidence of fire control. There's no evidence really of complex social structure. Most sightings are of solitary individuals. Most footprints are of solitary individuals or females with offspring in tow. So if it is a hominid, it would have to be a very early radiation, early divergence. Now, one of my predecessors, Gordon Strausenberg, was a strong advocate for Paranthropus. It was an interesting one. Paranthropus shares some of the same kinds of hypertrophy of the chewing apparatus that we see in Gigantopithecus. Big, deep jaws and thick molar enamel, enlarged premolars, and tiny incisors and canine teeth, non-projecting canine teeth, which allows for that side-to-side motion during chewing. And I always kind of, I thought, well, how could that be? I mean, you hear the fossil record for Paranthropus, ceased about 1.5 million years ago in East Africa, and Paranthropus only stood about 5.5, 5'8", males perhaps. So it's the wrong size in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I thought that would have ruled it out, except that just recently, you're probably aware of the discovery of Homo floresiensis, the hobbit in Southeast Asia, with a remarkably recent age of as young as perhaps 50,000 years now, as it's been modified up a little bit, but still 50,000 years is just a snap of the fingers in geologic time. Well, how do you, and everything points to Homo floresiensis being a very early Homo or even late Australopithecine. Skeletal anatomy, the thing has a brain the size of a chimpanzee. Its postcranial skeleton, its lower limbs, for example, look just like a chimpanzee or an Australopithecine. So how do you connect the dots from a late Australopithecine, early Homo in East Africa, or at the very best, perhaps in Asia Minor, making its way all the way to Southeast Asia without leaving any fossil record in between that we've discovered yet?
Yeah, there's so much that we don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, so that's not out of the question at all either. Something like a robust Australopithecine that as its range spread across South Asia into Eastern Asia, could have achieved gigantism, just as so many other mammals did during the early Pleistocene, and expanded its range into North America. Or Gigantopithecus would be another. So those are my
we know it could go the other way because the hobbits actually sort of devolved in terms of their size, probably because of the environment, and they became smaller to adapt to their environment.
Let's do our break, guys.
Yeah,
we've got more to come with Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum and Gene and Chris. We're learning a lot. The scientific look at Bigfoot and the possibilities. With Gene and Chris, you're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Be sure to visit GCNlive.com today.
The EPA says the air in our homes is up to 5 times more contaminated than outside air. The solution is not just to filter your air, but detox it. UVforlife.com now offers a doctor-recommended UVforlife.com sterilization unit to kill over 99% of viruses, bacteria, molds, and dangerous chemicals. Go to UVforlife.com. Add promo code GCN at checkout to save $100. That's UV, the number 4, life.com. UVforlife.com. Don't just filter your air, detox it.
Lifetime Gray's 100% grass-fed beef has the health benefits you seek. When compared to conventional beef, it offers good fats while virtually eliminating the bad. That's the result of cattle who never eat grain, ever. Rich in antioxidants, including vitamin E, C, beta-carotene, and CLA. No artificial hormones, antibiotics, or other drugs. For all our fresh, non-cooked products with only 100% grass-fed beef, go to MidasResources.com. Use voucher code GCN to get 30% off your order. MidasResources.com, or find us on Facebook.
Hi, Peter Vaccaro for ParanormalDate.com. Are you looking for love in all the wrong places? Now you have a chance to change that by signing up for free at ParanormalDate.com. This incredible dating site puts people of like minds together. People who are interested in the strange, the unusual, mysteries, ghosts, UFOs, and the afterlife, and so much more. ParanormalDate.com was developed for you, people seeking a viable alternative to the other dating services. You can join for free by going to ParanormalDate.com, and if you decide you like it and want to connect with people, use the code GEORGE for a substantial discount. Mark Rawlings, president of ParanormalDate.com, says so many people hunger to share their experiences about the paranormal, the unexplainable, or the afterlife, and so much more, and this is the source for them to meet and share that common interest. So sign up for free at ParanormalDate.com, ParanormalDate.com, and use the code GEORGE if you decide to connect with someone you like.
Are you happy washing your hands with harsh chemicals? Are you happy doing laundry with detergents? Are you happy paying high prices? Find your happiness with Pure Soap. These all-natural, earth-friendly Pure Soaps are the very best you've ever used. Buy in bulk. Get a 12, 36, or 48-month supply, or get items individually and still save big. You're getting soap products twice as good as what you're using now, earth-friendly and natural soaps. Your family deserves the best. Happiness is 5starsoap.com. Why not put your money up the drain for a change? See them at 5starsoap.com or call 1-800-340-7091 for a catalog. Cal Ben Soap Company can save you thousands of dollars and give you good old-fashioned real soaps that are triple concentrated. Soaps made from vegetable and coconut oils. See their full selection of soaps at 5starsoap.com. That's F-I-V-E starsoap.com. Or call 1-800-340-7091 for a catalog.
Is negative content or comments on the web affecting your personal or professional reputation? Unfavorable comments, embarrassing pictures, videos, legal documents, and negative articles can ruin your personal life, your career, or your business. It happens a lot, and it's just not fair. But what can you do? ReputationDefender.com can help protect your good name. Get a free consultation now. Call 800-831-0771. That's 800-831-0771. Call right now for a free expert reputation analysis. It's easy to squash the unfair attacks with our patented system, and the analysis is absolutely free. Make the best things about you jump out in searches. Protect your personal and professional reputation, your business, and your income. Get your free reputation analysis from ReputationDefender.com right now. Call 800-831-0771. 800-831-0771. That's 800-831-0771. Or visit ReputationDefender.com today.
This is Jacques Vallée. You're listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
If Chris sounds a little bit hoarse there, it's because he's suffering from the creeping rot.
It's the Zuni crud.
The Zuni crud, the creeping rot. I'm suffering from who knows what. But I have the tissue here, and I've taken the antihistamines, which have done nothing to my voice, as most of you will notice. And we're plugging on, but we don't have to worry about it because we have Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum here. He will keep us going, even when we run astray. Chris?
I have a quick question, though. Going through the the report logs and witness descriptions and looking at regional types of Sasquatch or Bigfoot, you do tend to see size variation, variation in description of how muscled they are. Some appear to be smaller in stature, like the skunk apes, for instance. The wild man or the almasties, for instance, or seem to be a smaller version. How can we account for what appear to be different types?
Right. Well, one of the things that has started to take shape and a theme that I've been pounding the drum about that is altering the anthropological community's perception of the place for this notion rests on two principles. One is that there's a growing appreciation, and this has been happening over the past 3 or 4 decades now, that the hominid niche is not an exclusive club, as was once thought. It was once believed that it was such an odd combination of adaptations, there could be only one species in it at a time. Now we know that from a burgeoning I guess is a relative term, but a growing fossil record of hominid evolution, that there were multiple species coexisting across the landscape at any given time in the past. So if you could step in a time machine and say, go back 2 million years to East Africa, you might bump into at least, right now are known at least 4 species of hominid. If you could go back to East Asia as recently as 20,000 years ago, you might bump into any of a half a dozen different species living alongside Homo sapiens. So those two recognitions, those two acknowledgments, one that there has been the rule rather than the exception has been the contemporaneity of many differently adapted hominid species living side by side across the landscape through time, and two, the fact that new revelations, recent revelations, have shown that many of these branches, several of these branches, not many, but several of these branches have persisted until more recently than ever recognized. So we have hobbits that are at least as young as 50,000 years. We have just recently a mandible of a Homo erectus was dredged up off the coast of Taiwan in a fisherman's net, and it was dated to 10,000 years ago. We have occupation sites attributed to Neanderthal that are perhaps as young as 10,000 years. We have Homo heidelbergensis found a specimen outside of Beijing that's less than 20,000 years. I mean, these were dates that would be unthinkable in the recent past. So why, in the face of that mounting evidence, on the one hand, and on the other hand, in the face of so much evidence and so much ethnographic tradition that there were several types of wild men, as you pointed out, the very Neanderthal-like Almasti, the little Australopithecine-like hobbit, or perhaps orang pendek, the modern or the recent equivalent, the Himalayan yeti, that all evidence, the best evidence points to a divergent big toe that would suggest it's a much more ape-like form, still inhabiting the subtropical to temperate forests of the Himalayas. And the Sasquatch, with its equivalents seen in China, in Southeast Asia, in the Caucasus Mountains. I was recently over in Russia and followed up on a sighting of a creature whose description was remarkably similar to Sasquatch and left 17-inch footprints that were essentially indistinguishable in all their characteristics and their specifics, contrast to human footprints, remarkably similar to a Sasquatch track.
What I'm hearing and what you're saying is that humanoid species are both older and newer than we previously suspected, that some branches survive for a longer period of time and might therefore still survive.
That's right, absolutely. So the term I like to apply to that is relic hominoid, a species that once was more widespread, but now is restricted, now persists into the present in a more restricted range and distribution. And of course, hominoid refers to the superfamily Hominoidea, which includes us and the great apes. So it would encompass, things that are very ape-like the Yeti, or things that could be early hominins like the Sasquatch, and things that could be very closely related to us like the Almas.
Now, this is interesting here because I listen to you and I'm hearing a scientist simply explain in a very logical way why these things can be. So why is it that scientists do not appear to accept any of this? It doesn't sound to me like it's anything outside the realm of logic at all.
Well, that's the case that I've been trying to make. Like I said, I've been beating this drum for quite a number of years, and now the evidence is becoming sort of overwhelming. It's undeniable, but some lessons are slow to be learned. And as I said, there was this paradigm, this notion of a single species that was very influential in anthropology back in the 60s. And so, Ivan Sanderson wrote this encyclopedic tome in which he marshaled all this evidence for subhuman species around the world. But when he presents that to the academic community in 1961, when it was published, that was right at the heyday of the notion that there could be only one hominid species at a time. And it was only subsequently in the 70s that the fossil record began to expand to the point that it was, just undeniable that there were multiple species coexisting, that it wasn't an exclusive club. And it's just been slow for that to finally take root. And even with the acknowledgement of that, it still was felt, basically the argument was just drop kicked further down the pike, kick the can down the road. to apply to modern humans. Well, modern humans, because of our culture and our technology and our intelligence, we have driven all these other hominids to extinction. Well, that's a big assumption when we have footprints and visual sightings of hominoids in Eastern Asia and Asia Minor and Siberia. When we have reports of Sasquatch in North America, and we have reports of little people, the orang pendek in Southeast Asia. I mean, that's the point. So
you forgot the yowie.
Well, yeah. The yowie is a little bit radioactive for me. My expertise is in footprints, and there still hasn't been presented a convincing footprint case, a case based on footprint evidence that we have a hominoid or a hominid in Australia. So what exactly we're dealing with there, it's one that fascinates me, and I've read widely on it, but I've always kind of dropped it a little bit. I'm not sure exactly yet. I haven't followed my train of thought out to its conclusion as of yet. But the point I wanted to make, though, is while the formal institutional scientific community still is reluctant, this is the backdrop, I guess I should say. But there is also another veneer, and that is this notion of skepticism and the misplaced label of pseudoscience when it applies to the search for Sasquatch and other relic hominoids. And that is another issue that we've had to deal with, is, the show me the body, the mantra that Michael Shermer likes to chant.
Right.
They want the conclusion before the evidence is analyzed.
Right.
We'll have more to discuss with Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum. And Gene and Chris, you're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Be sure to visit GCNlive.com today.
We also have swag. We have all these exclusive Paracast things that you can buy. We've got 60 or so different items, and entails t-shirts, sleeves for notebook computers, iPad cases, mouse pads, the Paracast Jumbo tote bag, all sorts of t-shirts and jackets and stuff like that for men and women. We have a Paracast aluminum water bottle. All this stuff, you go to store.theparacast.com, store.theparacast.com. What makes it special is that the items are the best quality, great t-shirts, fabrics, and they have our official logo on them. That's what makes them special, in multiple sizes and colors. We even have stuff for children, stuff for women, stuff for men. We have all sorts of sizes, like small up to X large. A lot of good stuff. That's the swag from the Paracast. You go to store.theparacast.com, stop by, and take a shopping tour.
Don't know what contaminants are lurking in your water? Time to get a ProPure. Take advantage of ProPure's holiday sale. Save 25% on all ProPure water filter products. Sale's good through December 31st. There's a ProPure water filter for you. Visit your authorized ProPure dealer for details or ProPureUSA.com. That's ProPureUSA.com.
Paid non-attorney spokesperson Adam Pulaski of the Pulaski Law Firm with principal office in Houston, Texas is the attorney responsible for the content of this ad. This ad is not legal advice, and the choice of a lawyer should not be based solely upon advertisement. Services may not be available in all states. Attention Xarelto users. If you or a loved one took Xarelto and suffered a serious bleeding event, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Xarelto is a popular prescription blood thinner used to prevent blood clots and protect patients from strokes. These serious bleeding events have led to numerous cases of hospitalization and even death. Phone lines are open 24/7. Call 800-261-0937. That's 800-261-0937.
Is there a stock market bubble in the making? You need an early warning system for your investments because you work too hard to be surprised by your money. Now, guarding your wealth has never been easier. Introducing WealthGuard from OnTheMarkMoney.com, an early warning system that tracks all your accounts. WealthGuard lets you know in advance if your accounts are dropping. It works for all accounts, whether you work with us or not. Get WealthGuard today, 100% free. Go to OnTheMarkMoney.com. That's OnTheMarkMoney.com.
What would your life be like if you woke up each morning with new vitality, feeling better than you have in years, and you noticed a difference in your sleeping patterns, blood sugar levels, and had a sense of well-being overall? There's something that is changing thousands of people's lives, and you could be one of them. It's called Heart and Body Extract. Sharon Harris, co-creator of Heart and Body Extract, talks about the positive effects of Heart and Body Extract.
What happens with the formula Heart and Body Extract is it's giving the body the necessary vitamins, minerals, amino acids, enzymes, and phytonutrients so the body will heal itself. And yes, the body does have the ability to balance blood pressure, balance cholesterol, clean and unclog the arteries. It can also work on balancing the circulation for diabetics. So the body is an amazing thing. It simply needs some help so it has the tools to heal itself.
Heart and Body Extract gets results. To order your 2-month supply, call now, toll free at 866-295-5305. Order online at hbextract.com.
This is Ben Gordon, and if your teeth are stained from coffee, tea, or smoking, Power Swabs is the answer. In 5 minutes, you'll see 2 shades whiter teeth, and in 7 days, 6 shades. There's no messy strips or trays that you have to leave in your mouth for an hour. Just swab your teeth for 5 minutes, and you're done. To try Power Swabs, call 1-800-290-8480. Your bright white smile will have your friends talking about how great you look. Try it risk-free. 1-800-290-8480. That's 1-800-290-8480.
Hello, this is John Burroughs, one of the witnesses to the Rendlesham UFO incident. You're listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
Now, my head cold feels a little bit better. I think it's because it's such an enjoyable episode. Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum is here to talk about discoveries into Bigfoot, Sasquatch. And it's enough to set off Siri.
Sorry, I couldn't find anything like that.
You're not looking, Siri. That's the problem. This has been happening more and more lately. I think it's some kind of psychosomatic ailment or some kind of paranoid or paranormal phenomenon. But seriously speaking, Jeff, is it possible at this point in time to even estimate the population of these creatures around the world? I mean, how many would it take to produce an occasional sighting, and how many would we need to just have evidence all over the place?
Right. Well, I have not tackled that issue on a global scale, certainly, but just to give an example on a more local scale, because I'm often asked this, how many Sasquatch do you think there are? And I always try to emphasize the rarity, and the comeback is always, well, how do you sustain a viable reproductive population? Well, that's a real nebulous concept. And, if you dig a little bit, you'll find that there is no standard, there's no scale, really. It depends entirely upon the genetic load, the genetic, deleterious recessive load that a population bears, which if it's high, then that precipitates, inbreeding depression. You don't marry your cousin because the chance of the two of you having some harmful recessive gene cropping up in your children then becomes statistically very high. But if your gene pool is fairly free of those kinds of mutations, then a population can muddle along just fine. Mountain gorillas went through a bottleneck where their population was reduced to below 200. And they've rebounded now. I think there's between 600, 800, with no signs of deleterious effects of inbreeding. Their gene pool could tolerate that. Now, one rule of thumb, if you do some research or dig into that's thrown out by some for vertebrates, would be about 1,000 individuals to have a reasonably viable population. Well, that's easily accommodated in North America for Sasquatch. Yeah. A little exercise, and I won't go through the whole thing with you here, but we have some suggestive evidence from which we can infer that being solitary, they probably have a very large range given the habitat, depending on the habitat too, how that range may vary considerably. But let's say 1,000 square miles, and in that 1,000 square miles, a solitary male may defend or patrol an area that overlaps that of some females. So say in 1,000 square miles, there's one dominant male and 1 or 2, maybe 3 females, and probably a couple offspring in the mix there. Let's just say 5 individuals. Well, if you look at a map of Idaho And also bear in mind one more factor. There's a pretty good correlation, it seems, between credible Sasquatch sightings and precipitation. It seems that these creatures require a habitat that is associated with about 16 to 18 inches or more of precipitation.
So more temperate.
Yeah, temperate but moist. I mean, they need moist forests. The core habitat seems to be Douglas fir forests, in a rich understory, say with blueberry and other fruiting shrubs and so forth. There has to be water. They seem to be pretty wet apes, require wet habitat. But in any case, you look at Idaho, how many 1,000 square mile plots could you fit into the areas of Idaho that have a suitable habitat associated with that kind of rainfall? Well, there's about 12, maybe 14. That's going to vary, obviously, with surface area, given topography, and given patchiness of the habitat, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, these are very coarse numbers. But if that's in a ballpark, 5 times 12, there's only about 60 Sasquatch in the entire state of Idaho. There's 20,000 black bear in Idaho, by comparison.
Right. That could also explain why we haven't found skeletons, why we don't find more evidence, physical evidence of their passing, shall we say?
Because if you add to those numbers the fact that they are probably long-lived, large apes, and there's a good correlation, positive correlation of longevity with body size, so they could live to be 50, 60 years old easily. So of those 60 that are in Idaho, how many of them are in their golden years that are going to die a natural death because they wouldn't have any natural predators? There's not many things that would give an 800-pound gorilla cause for concern out in the forests of North America. So, how often is a death even going to occur in Idaho, for example, using our case? It may be at one in 10 years. And so what are your chances of finding that one body that has secreted itself off in some nook or cranny because it was feeling sick or decrepit or old and died, removed from its surroundings? When you think in terms of that degree of rarity, then the objections to the lack of that definitive physical evidence aren't really so damning after all.
Right, but if there are no predators directly and no impediments to population, wouldn't that population grow over time somewhat?
Well, not necessarily, because the rate of reproduction is very low in large apes. So you look at, say, orangutans, just as an example, a female will only give birth every 6 to 8 years, and they're very slow to develop. So that whole life history cycle, it's not like rabbits or rats reproducing, or even deer or elk reproducing, or even bear. I mean, it's potentially 4 times. I think bears' life expectancy is somewhere between 20 and 30 years. So this is twice to 3 times that length, with a much lower rate of reproduction. So no, I don't think it would. And it's not to say even without natural predators, there's accidents, there's illness, there could be starvation due to hard winters or whatever. But yeah, and of course then we've got, anytime you add to the mix habitat degradation and fragmentation, that's also going to affect the ability of especially these lone solitary individuals to find a mate, to get together for procreation. And so no, I don't think we would expect burgeoning populations. This is the challenge of conserving the other great apes. When a gorilla population goes down to a bottleneck like the mountain gorillas did, it takes them decades to rebound.
Right. That's not even mentioning the vast spaces in British Columbia and parts of Alberta that very few people have ever even been. I mean, there's millions of acres up there that are virgin, untapped. There's no way in, no way out. There may be, a breeding population up there that's then kicking out the young males to go out on their own. But one thing that's always surprised me, and this is a figure that you could obviously argue about Sasquatch sightings in Oklahoma and Kansas, but according to my research, these types of creatures have been seen in 48 of 50 states, seen and reported. And that is unbelievable. I mean, where would a Bigfoot hide, or the DuPont monster, as he's called, in southern Illinois?
Well, I think you used the operative word there. It is rather unbelievable. I just have a real hard time. If you open up a field guide to mammals, Peterson's Field Guide to Mammals, and turn to the range map of black bears, which are another large omnivore, while they may partition that niche, I'm sure they partition that niche a bit differently, still they have some of the basic habitat requirements that we've associated with Sasquatch. Look at the range distribution there, and it doesn't cover 48 other states.
Right.
And so I always challenge the would-be reporters to corroborate their visual sighting with footprint evidence. And even the footprint evidence has to be examined carefully. I mean, it's been my experience. I think those numbers are grossly overinflated, because when I've had the opportunity to track down and examine footprint evidence, you cannot take someone at their word, because most, with a few exceptions. I mean, there are experienced, qualified, authoritative witnesses out there, no doubt. But a lot of the footprint examples that are shared with me are, they could be potholes, they could be misidentified bear, lots of misidentified human footprints. It just requires that I really look at that. So I can't take those reports on paper at face value, and especially then a visual account where all you have is the ability of that individual to describe their experience. It's not necessarily reliable.
We've got more to come with Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum and Gene and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
Attack of the Rockoids has been well received by critics and readers alike. It's a thrill-a-minute story you'll never forget. A former U.S. military intelligence officer is haunted by intense dreams about a beautiful woman pleading for his help after a terrible battle in outer space. But the dreams turn out to be true and thrust him into a telepathic love affair with a woman whose faraway planet is intent on destroying the Earth. And now the gripping tale continues in The Coming of the Protectors. It's the second book of the Rockoids trilogy, a galaxy-spanning adventure that pits our hapless heroes against powerful, fanatical enemies that threaten the lives of freedom-loving beings everywhere. Attack of the Rockoids and The Coming of the Protectors, classic science fiction at its best, available now. For more details, visit rockoids.com. That's ROCKOIDS.com.
I'm David Hall, founder of Diamond Gusset Jeans, here to wish you all a Merry Christmas. For over 20 years, we have built a loyal customer base with 100% American-made jeans featuring enhanced fit, comfort, durability, and style. Today, all of our inventory is discounted by 20%, so don't delay. Enjoy a wonderful shopping experience at Gusset.com. Thanks for keeping our American dream alive, the original Diamond Gusset jean.
By now you know that wireless technology like cell phones do in fact pose dangers to the health and privacy of everyone. Blockit Pocket's wide range of products are unmatched in providing the protection you deserve. No scare tactics, just common sense. BlockitPocket.com offers quality American-made options to alleviate and eliminate these invisible dangers. Learn more at BlockitPocket.com or call 888-315-9618. BlockitPocket.com, enhancing health and privacy.
Welcome back to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
Now, a little bit later in the episode, we've got a number of questions from our listeners, which they posted in the Paracast forums at forum.theparacast.com. We're talking to Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, one of the few academics who takes Bigfoot seriously. Now, with all this stuff and all this logic you're presenting us, why is it that science isn't giving it more attention? It sounds to me like just a natural evolution of their studies of different species of humanoids and other creatures.
Right. Well, I think we're slowly getting to that point, and I have, in some capacities, interaction with my colleagues where they are quite open. I edit an online scholarly journal with an editorial board that consists of PhDs and other professionals with the appropriate skill sets. I also, in that capacity, recruit reviewers or commentators on submissions to that journal. And I go after the best and the most prominent experts in the various fields, and many have been quite willing to offer their opinion and to give an objective scholarly commentary on those submissions. But it still has such a stigma attached to it that many are unwilling to jeopardize their career, their reputation. And I certainly wouldn't encourage a young assistant professor just starting down their career path to get mired in the controversy that surrounds it, unfortunately, openly. It's too, I can speak from experience, because I was not even idealistic enough to jump into the deep end of the pool before I had tenure. It was a bloody, bruising battle to get through that gauntlet because of the narrow-mindedness of many of my colleagues in my department and campus. So, but on the other hand, the reaction has spanned the gambit from my colleagues. There are those who are very, very interested and passionate about it, passionately curious about it. At the opposite extreme, there are those who have I can only describe as a visceral rejection of it for various reasons that we've touched on already. Been an interesting. I've been at this now since '96, so 20 some years.
Well, you've managed to emerge fairly unscathed. So whatever brand of academic Teflon that you're using, I would suggest patenting the recipe, because having dealt with a number of paranormal subjects and met scientists who are very interested in the subjects and heard about the same types of problems that they would encounter if they attempted to to be more public about their interests. Right. These are toxic subjects. Anytime you have subject areas that are rife with hoaxing, rife with, shall we say, a good science procedure and the scientific method not adhered to properly, you're going to run into some real pushback and reluctance, I think, on from the mainstream. Where do you come down on Melba Ketchum's attempt a number of years ago, I think in 2012, where she attempted to get some DNA analysis of I think 17 or 19 samples? I'm not even sure if that ended up being the final number. Could you give our listeners maybe a little rundown on that particular effort and what they did wrong, what they did right, and how we can improve it next time?
Right. Well, in fact, I just published or posted in our journal an article by a Ph.D. chemist who did a fantastic review of not only Dr. Ketchum's study, but Dr. Sykes and a couple of other DNA analyses of alleged Sasquatch samples, and I'd encourage your reviewers to check that out. It's at the Relic Hominoid Inquiry, which is just simply isu.edu/RHI. But he was actually quite kind and pointed out some of the shortcomings. I, at this point, not so generous in my assessment of that whole thing, having been involved with it, well, not involved with it, but having been observing it from the sidelines pretty much since her first exposure to the Sasquatch subject. But in short, because we don't have much time, and I hate to spend too much time on this, absolutely no credibility whatsoever. Nothing in that report is really reliable, or none of the conclusions, let's put it that way, and interpretations of the data, insofar as the data is reliable and actually describing novel sequences. Like I said, we could spend the whole hour talking about it. But I mean, you mentioned the number of samples, so I'll just I'll just comment on that. I think it was in excess of 100 samples.
Oh, 100, wow.
Yeah. But every one of which, at least as reported, yielded Sasquatch DNA in her assessment. Now, I've screened dozens and dozens of hair samples that have been submitted to me, and probably 10%, if that, are primate hair. And the question is simply whether it's human or whether it's potentially Sasquatch. And there are some characteristics that, including being uncut. Most human hair samples that you pick up have been cut at some point, and the end shows that that process having taken place. But by far the majority are of common forms of wildlife. People don't recognize or realize that hair persists in the environment to a remarkable degree.
Yeah, it's resilient.
It's very resilient, and so the odds, to illustrate that, there's a great book on tracking, and Elbrock. He talks about hair in the final chapters of his book, and when he has students out in the field and they stop for a lunch break, he won't let them stand up until they pick up 10 strands of hair. And once he says, at first it seems like that's impossible, but once you get a search image for these fibers, you start finding them all over the place. I mean, they're just everywhere. And so when a witness out there, a would-be witness, whether they actually did encounter a Sasquatch or not, presumably in association, plucks a hair from a fence or from a branch of an overhanging branch of a tree, they may think that was left by what they saw, but chances are it's been there for quite a while, and it could be some of anything. So that the fact that she claimed that all of her samples were Sasquatch was
I had no idea that she had said that.
And one of the samples that held a central position in her whole analysis enmeshed her study with the remarkably dubious experiences of Justin Schmea, the supposed killer of a Sasquatch in California, and I was involved with that from very early on, and it became very obvious that there was no credibility there, and that the sample that he'd collected was not primate. And all I had to do was look at it under a jeweler's loop, and could tell you that it was fur. It was not hair of a primate. It was fur. At the time, I thought it was most, just looking at it visually with a 15-power loop, was probably something like a coyote. It turned out it was bear, as was confirmed by 2 independent labs separately. And yet she still included that in her study and said that it was the best sample that she had.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Ouch.
So, yeah, it was unfortunately it was a huge distraction, both that study and because that prompted me. I mean, my principal objective in the field was to garner tissues from which we could do DNA analysis. And so when she claimed that she had, dozens and dozens of samples already submitted to her, I kind of pulled back on our field efforts and focused. It wasn't a waste of time, because I focused attention on things like launching the relic hominoid inquiry and our virtual footprints archive and other sort of laboratory-based studies and analyses to further those. But, we were crossing our fingers that she was going to, pull the rabbit out of the hat. Unfortunately, that's what she pulled out of the hat. It's just a rabbit, no Sasquatch.
A rabbit, a bear, some coyotes, maybe a couple
yeah, lions and tigers and bears, oh my.
We're going to have more creatures coming at us if we don't do our break.
All
Dr.
right.
Jeffrey Meldrum with Gene and Chris, you're in Paracast. Neighbors, I want to tell you about my favorite graphics app. It's the award-winning Graphic Converter. Graphic Converter is the universal genius for photo editing on your Mac. Join over 1.5 million loyal users for this Swiss Army knife photo editing app. It gives you all you expect from a top-flight image editing app with tons of features, and most important, it's easy to use. It's also far less expensive than that other app that you can only get by subscription. The one I'm talking about. What's more, you can get 20% off with your order right now. So write this down to learn about Graphic Converter. Go to www.lemkesoft.de/gene. Let me spell that. www.lemkesoft.de/gene.
Hi, this is Dr. Joel Wallach, the Dead Doctors Don't Lie guy. Have you ever wondered why farmers can keep their livestock lean and healthy just by feeding them minerals in a nutrient-dense diet? Before market, they cut off their minerals, leaving them to crave high-calorie grains to fatten them up. So if weight control is this easy, why does the medical system prescribe invasive surgical gastric bypass for humans? The truth be told, according to research, you can avoid over 900 different diseases just by getting 90 essential nutrients daily. Check us out on the web at sonsoflibertyteam.com. and order your Healthy Start Pack and get your 90 for life. Or dial 855-301-TEAM. I said essential, not optional, and every day. Easy. 90 for life on the web at sonsoflibertyteam.com or call 855-301-TEAM. That's 855-301-TEAM. That's 855-301-TEAM. Check us out on the web at sonsoflibertyteam.com. At sonsoflibertyteam.com.
This is Dan Pilla. Do you owe the IRS money you can't pay? Are tax debts crippling you? I've defended people from the IRS for over 30 years. I've helped thousands, and I can help you too. I wrote the book on IRS settlement, and I'm telling you, there's no such thing as a hopeless case. Call 800-34-NO-TAX to finally get free of IRS debt. With the IRS's new programs, there's never been a better time to solve your problem. Call 800-34-NO-TAX. That's 800-34-NO-TAX, or my website, danpilla.com.
Hi, Peter Vaccaro for ParanormalDate.com. Are you looking for love in all the wrong places? Now you have a chance to change that by signing up for free at ParanormalDate.com. This incredible dating site puts people of like minds together. People who are interested in the strange, the unusual, mysteries, ghosts, UFOs, and the afterlife, and so much more. ParanormalDate.com was developed for you, people seeking a viable alternative to the other dating services. You can join for free by going to ParanormalDate.com, and if you decide you like it and want to connect with people, use the code GEORGE for a substantial discount. Mark Rawlings, president of ParanormalDate.com, says so many people hunger to share their experiences about the paranormal, the unexplainable, or the afterlife, and so much more, and this is the source for them to meet and share that common interest. So sign up for free at ParanormalDate.com, ParanormalDate.com, and use the code GEORGE if you decide to connect with someone you like.
Attention citizens, this man has received national attention for accurately predicting every major financial trend, including the market crash of 2008. His name is Harry Dent, and in his newly released book, he is making even bigger and bolder predictions that have the potential to devastate the world economy and your personal wealth. You can get a free copy of Harry Dent's bestseller, The Sale of a Lifetime, containing never-before published information by simply visiting www.saleofalifetime.com/free book. Again, that's saleofalifetime.com/free book.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our famous Paracast community forums at forum.theparacast.com.
Welcome back, everyone. We've been talking with Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum here, and we do have quite a number of questions. We have covered a lot of them already. I have one, though, that I think is the $64,000 question. Do we have any DNA evidence that supports the existence of a Bigfoot-type animal?
Do we have any?
Yes.
No. Short answer is no. Unfortunately, we don't. I mean, there have been a couple of little suggestive things. You may remember the documentary from Monster Quest where we went up to the Snellgrove Lake in Ontario.
Right.
And we had rocks thrown at us, and there was that infamous nail board or screw board, and tissues were collected from that. And one of the participants in that outing, Kurt Nelson, went to great lengths to try to get DNA from a badly degraded sample, and was only able to get a small fragment of about 300 base pairs. But there was an interesting substitution that had not been reported for humans, but was common to chimpanzees. So we know it wasn't chimpanzee DNA up there, but with only 300 bases, and given the extraordinary lengths he had to go to isolate and purify that sample. You know, the more you manipulate, the more chances there are for a misread or some alteration.
Right.
And so 1 out of 300 just isn't enough. So that was suggestive, but all the Melbas is unreliable, is not definitive by any means of an unknown species, and certainly not some hybrid, as she had advocated long before she ever had DNA samples.
What was the term that she used? The God gene or something that just absolutely blew the whole thing out of the water just from that one term?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. It caught me off flat-footed there on that one.
There was some term in there that just, but the debunkers jumped all over it.
Oh, well, the most ridiculous things was when she published the minimum spanning tree to show the affiliations, the closest affiliations of the sequences to other taxa that she had garnered from the databases. One of the closest ties was to Galligocrassidens, which is a galligo. It's a little prosimian, a lemur-like thing from Madagascar. And she, when describing this on the radio at one point, she said, this was struck us as very odd until we learned that there was a subfossil lemur that weighed 400 pounds in Madagascar that only went extinct, 10,000 years ago.
I did not know that.
Well, yeah. So we went from some subhuman hooking up with a European human female to now we've got a human female of 15,000 years ago in Europe, somehow making it down to Madagascar to hook up with a 400-pound lemur.
Dang, she gets around.
And from that produced the lineage that gave rise to Sasquatch in North America.
It sounds like a real party girl.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's the lengths that it went to incredulity. But then unfortunately, Dr. Sykes' samples did not seem to yield, reportedly did not yield any DNA that couldn't readily be attributed to common forms of wildlife. I had been very hopeful when Dr. Sykes came on the scene that this would be, some redemption for the debacle that was the Ketchum study. And, I think he went about it very systematically, although Dr. Hart shows some of the shortcomings in his experimental design as well. But nevertheless, I had offered to, as I said, when I am given hair samples, there's a lot of chaff there to be winnowed away from the kernel. And I offered to screen the samples because I knew that if he put out a call for specimens, he'd receive everything under the sun, And why waste our time and effort on things that are obviously deer or
right?
elk?
You got to have a filter or some sort of screening process.
Focus,
absolutely.
Focus your beam a little bit here. And he didn't want to impose any preconceptions on the sampling. So as you can expect, his results spanned the gambit, even to porcupine from Texas. And I could hold a porcupine guard hair up to the light and tell you it wasn't a Sasquatch hair. It's that kind of unfortunate waste of time and energy. And but then there were also some other. There were a number of samples that went unaccounted for. There were a number that I personally sent to him that I did screen that matched what we think is the gold standard of morphology perfectly. These were samples that came from, there were a couple from Texas, there was one from British Columbia, one from Washington, I remember, and they just, looked spot on what we think a Sasquatch hair looks like under the microscope. And they didn't seem to be included. So my fear was that there were samples that morphologically were very spot on, but as has been the case in the past, we've been unable to get DNA from them because they have a feature like a acellular medulla that makes extracting DNA from a hair shaft without an actively growing bulb or follicle rather challenging. And so I've not followed through with this query to Dr. Sykes, but I suspect that some of the samples that didn't yield DNA went unreported. And in fact, those might have been the most interesting.
Interesting how that's the case.
Well, yeah. Whatever the case may be, we're still, unfortunately, at home plate when it comes to, we haven't even got to first base yet when it comes to a DNA analysis to demonstrate a novel species by that means.
Well, let's get to some of our questions. I have one from F. Workman, who's been a poster at forum.theparacast.com. You go to the question bank and you can write your questions out that we then relay on to our guests. This is an interesting one. A number of cases that I've investigated have featured strange premonitions that the witness has or claims to have had before an encounter. And his question is, some witnesses have experienced so-called paranormal happenings or sensations when encountering Bigfoot. And he's wondering if you have any theories why some witnesses have felt a presence, like an abnormal feeling of fear or dread, before a visual, olfactory, or some sort of sonic event that they can, in their own minds, attribute to a Sasquatch.
Right. Well, short of appealing to a paranormal or parapsychological explanation, if there is a biological explanation, one that I have entertained and have discussed at some length in my book, in the chapter on vocalizations, is the notion of infrasound. And I know that infrasound has gotten a lot of mileage and an embellishment along the way. I think the term of late has been being zapped by a Bigfoot, but there is this interesting combination of factors. We know now that a lot of animals employ infrasonic frequencies in their vocalizations, whether it's to broadcast to their conspecifics over great distance, like elephants, when it was one of the first terrestrial species.
Right, they could communicate through 30 feet of concrete.
Exactly, and over kilometers of distance.
More to come with Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum. With Gene and Chris, you're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
Did you know your car can be hacked just like your computer or phone? Hackers can hijack the signal of your own key fob to burglarize your vehicle in seconds. The Black Hole Faraday key fob bag is a signal impenetrable shield that stops these hacks in their tracks. Protect one of your most valuable assets. Go to hackproofbag.com. That's hackproofbag.com and use promo code RADIO to get 20% off. Or call 805-222-4584. 805-222-4584.
This is Ben Gordon, and if your teeth are stained from coffee, tea, or smoking, Power Swabs is the answer. In 5 minutes, you'll see 2 shades whiter teeth, and in 7 days, 6 shades. There's no messy strips or trays that you have to leave in your mouth for an hour. Just swab your teeth for 5 minutes, and you're done. To try Power Swabs, call 1-800-290-8480. Your bright white smile will have your friends talking about how great you look. Try it risk-free. 1-800-290-8480. That's 1-800-290-8480.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. Do you feel like you're losing control over your finances? If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank account, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Take control of your tax problems now by calling the experts at Tax Mediation Services and take advantage of the Fresh Start program and new laws that may allow us to negotiate a settlement for the lowest amount possible. Our team of tax attorneys and enrolled agents can stop collections and get you protected so you can take control of your financial future. Tax Mediation Services is accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Call now for a free case review and a price protection guaranteed quote.
Call Tax Mediation Services now at 800-615-7709. That's 800-615-7709. 800-615-7709.
Paid non-attorney spokesperson. Injury Help Desk is responsible for this advertisement. Principal office, Las Vegas, Nevada. This ad is not legal advice, and the choice of a lawyer should not be based solely upon advertisements. Services may not be available in all states. Attention heartburn drug users. If you or a loved one has taken Nexium, Prevacid, or Prilosec to treat heartburn, acid reflux, or indigestion, and suffered serious kidney damage, chronic kidney disease, or kidney failure, you may be entitled to substantial financial compensation. Studies from the JAMA Internal Medicine indicate a significant increased risk of acute and chronic kidney disease from taking proton pump inhibitors. inhibitors. If you or a loved one was diagnosed with kidney failure or chronic kidney disease after taking Nexium, Prevacid, or Prilosec to treat heartburn, acid reflux, or indigestion, you may be entitled to substantial financial compensation. Act now. Time is limited to file a claim. For a free consultation and free information, call Injury Help Desk now. You may be entitled to substantial financial compensation. Call 800-225-8944. That's 800-225-8944. Again, 800-225-8944. Call now.
Winter has just begun, and are you already tired of being cold? How would you like to never be cold again? This is Dale with Fortress Clothing, and I'm here to tell you, you will never be cold again with Fortress. If you're tired of freezing your butt off, elk hunting, sitting in a tree stand, deer hunting, winter camping, fishing, ice fishing, no longer fear the cold. If you snowmobile, ski, snowboard, get Fortress. Sledding with the kids, shoveling the walks, shopping, or if you or your spouse get cold feet at home, get Fortress. If you're stuck outside working in the cold or find yourself in an emergency situation, get our winter bug out bag and you will never be cold again. Fortress is the answer, so quit complaining and go to fortressclothing.com. It's a mid-layer garment that goes with anything you want to wear. Enter coupon code RADIO and get 20% off any item. Go now while we still have inventory. fortressclothing.com.
This is Kurt Severn, the author of UFO Mysteries, and you're listening to the Paracast.
Hey, I heard a commercial the other day for a very respectable advertiser, My Pillow. You know, get a very comfortable pillow and everything.
Moving up in the world.
That's, GCN is signing up some mainstream advertisers.
Well, we must be doing something right there, Gene.
Well, I'm not getting paid for it, and you're not getting paid for it, so it doesn't really help. We have Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, and we didn't pay him either. He's just a nice guy. That's why he shows up.
Very nice, very gracious to come on the show. We do consider ourselves kind of the 60 Minutes of the paranormal. We don't, suspend our disbelief and scratch our guests' bellies. We make them work. Oh, here's some more questions that are pretty interesting. This is from Ronaway. He's been a longtime poster at forum.theparacast.com, where you guys get to ask questions of our wonderful guests. And he says, as with UFO sightings, he believes that it is ludicrous to think that all Sasquatch sightings are either fabricated or a misidentification. Do you believe that the government agencies are fully aware of the creature's existence? And if so, what is your favorite theory for the cover-up?
Yeah. I know there are a lot of people out there who have experiences or claim experiences with men in black and unmarked aircraft and so forth. I've not had any of those. Either I'm disseminating great disinformation unwittingly, and so they're just letting me go, or has been suggested that if I was intimidated or accosted, that I'd be too visible rather, too much in the public eye, so they have to just kind of let me go on my own. But the experiences I have had where there has been intentional, overt suppression of information or evidence, it has primarily resulted from, much like in the scientific community, it's this attitude that it can't exist. It's a wild goose chase. I don't want to be embarrassed by any reports that are taking place on my watch, or two, I don't want to be challenged about spending taxpayers' money. You may have seen the ridiculous news coverage about an event that I participated down at the University of New Mexico at Gallup, where an unscrupulous reporter teamed up with a desperate politician to try to create a scandal to get publicity for his re-election bid, apparently, is what it seems to boil down to. But a public event that was well known for months and months and months, it suddenly became a hot topic. And the bottom line was, how was state money being spent to finance a gathering, a conference on Bigfoot, and to underwrite some field exploration to visit some of the sites and see some of the habitat and visit with some of the local witnesses. So those two things, I think, are much more. Certainly, there's also, in industry, the forest or logging industry certainly doesn't want to have a lot of amateur investigators tromping through and trespassing on private property. So I think there's a potential for suppression of information there. You hear stories about loggers who are told to just don't tell, don't talk about it. We don't want to draw attention. We don't want this to be the mother of all spotted owls type situation.
Right. Oh boy, that would be the last thing in the world the Weyerhaeuser would want to deal with.
Right. Well, exactly. And so, in the national parks, for example, I know of rangers who've had experiences, but they never reported up the line, and there's because of fear of retribution or criticism or whatever,
or some sort of blowback, just like pilots and UFO sightings, the same sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's very similar. Well, another question from F. Workman is, he's wondering if you've ever had an encounter during one of your investigations, or have you had any other types of so-called paranormal? I put in so-called because it's such a catch-all phrase.
Sure.
So-called paranormal experiences while investigating the case.
Well, I have. In the introduction to my book, I describe one close encounter that was quite interesting. Not a visual encounter, but under the cover of fog that had rolled in off the California coast into the Six Rivers area. We had something rifling through backpacks and brushing against tents and rain flies, but able to just kind of dissolve back into the murk when we get out of our tents, but was leaving 16-inch footprints.
Wow, that's pretty up close and personal.
Yeah. I may have had a visual encounter just last fall. Not in 2015, I was up in Alberta with an investigator there and saw just a silhouetted, what seemed to be a silhouetted figure that was in context of something that had approached our camp, was popping brush, had vocalized, and was reacting to our attempts to talk at it. You try to reassuringly speak to it, and suddenly it sounded like a baseball bat was cracked and broken into, that kind of thing. And then it broke from the shadows and quickly walked across the road into the shadows on the opposite side. This being observed through night vision. Not certain. I'd say there's much better than a 50-50 chance that indeed it was a Bigfoot, given the context, especially would up that perhaps, to 70%.
Well, where in Alberta was that?
It was about midway up, straight west from Calgary, right up against the Rocky Mountains, just north of the oh shucks, just went blank. I'm having a senior moment here.
What, around Lake Louise, Saskatchewan River area there? Or?
Yeah, roughly. I think that sounds right.
Yeah. Oh, that's my favorite place in North America. That is unbelievably beautiful up there.
Yeah, oh, it was. It was amazing.
And that is, boy, if I was a Bigfoot, that's where I'd want to live.
Exactly.
I heard years ago a story circulating around the local Washington State Bigfoot community of supposedly a community of Bigfoot right in the center of British Columbia, in a very, very closed off valley, that there was only one way in and one way out, and that there were two huge firs or western red cedars or some huge conifer. Two of them had been pulled down and bowed down and tied together, lashed together like a big McDonald's arch at the entrance to this particular valley, and that there was a sizable community of these creatures living in there, and it seemed to be some sort of central point, and that there actually was a fairly large social group there. Have you ever heard anything like that before?
I haven't. No, not to that extent. But again, my question would be, what's the basis for that assertion? Is there
right?
Is there any evidence to back that up?
Well, if I remember correctly, it was a bush pilot that flew over it and was so frightened about it. He did mention it to some people, but never really went to the authorities or went anywhere further with it, because he number one, he was just too afraid for his own reputation, as understandably so, and number two, he felt that he would be doing the community a disservice if he actually ID'd the exact location. And people did try to backtrack his flight path and stuff. I mean, you hear stories all the time. That one was the only one that I've ever heard that talked about an actual group larger than, let's say, a family group, as described by like an Albert Ostman back when he said he was abducted by one and brought to a cave, blah, 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 which I've never really fully kind of embraced that particular account. But how about Jacko? Supposedly in the 1880s, a railroad sideshow kind of a circus allegedly had a juvenile Bigfoot that was on display for a number of weeks. That would be able to wrench apart wood in a very unnatural, impossible way. And I've been, for years, I tried to search down some alleged photographs that have been taken of it. Does that ring a bell? It was a Canadian.
Absolutely. No, that's one of the classics in the lore. I think the person who's probably done some of the most investigation of that is Christopher Murphy.
Let's do our break here, guys. We've got more to come with Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum and Gene and Chris. You're in a Paracast.
You are listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
We also have swag. You know, we have all these exclusive Paracast things that you can buy. We've got like, I guess, 60 or so different items, and entails t-shirts, sleeves for notebook computers, iPad cases, mouse pads, the Paracast Jumbo tote bag, all sorts of t-shirts and jackets and stuff like that for men and women. We have a Paracast aluminum water bottle. All this stuff, you go to store.theparacast.com, store.theparacast.com. What makes it special is that the items are the best quality, great t-shirts, fabrics, and they have our official logo on them. That's what makes them special, in multiple sizes and colors. We even have stuff for children, stuff for women, stuff for men. We have all sorts of sizes, like small up to X large. A lot of good stuff. That's the swag from the Paracast. You go to store.theparacast.com, stop by, and take a shopping tour.
Hi, this is Ted Anderson. I'm here to tell you about GCNtelecare.com, a team of board-certified doctors assisting you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Within 15 minutes of registration, care your family can afford. Revolutionizing the healthcare industry, virtual consulting providing diagnosis of non-emergency medical issues by phone or secure video on computer or smart mobile devices. GCNtelecare.com. Virtual care anywhere.
Paid non-attorney spokesperson Adam Pulaski of the Pulaski Law Firm with principal office in Houston, Texas is the attorney responsible for the content of this ad. This ad is not legal advice, and the choice of a lawyer should not be based solely upon advertisement. Services may not be available in all states. Attention Xarelto users. If you or a loved one took Xarelto and suffered a serious bleeding event, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Xarelto is a popular prescription blood thinner used to prevent blood clots and protect patients from strokes. These serious bleeding events have led to numerous cases of hospitalization and even death. Phone lines are open 24/7. Call 800-261-0937. That's 800-261-0937.
How confident are you in your food storage? If it was all you had to rely on, would it sustain your family? Hard times, good times, or any time, Numana Storable Food is the proven superior choice. Learn for yourself what happened when one man ate only Numana Storable Food for an entire month. Online at powerprepper.com. That's powerprepper.com. Experience the Numana difference.
American-made food stores I love to eat. Yum!
This is a healthcare alert from the Pain Relief Hotline. If you, a family member, or a loved one suffers from knee, back, shoulder, or ankle pain and have Medicare as your primary insurance, we've got great news. You don't have to suffer any longer. You can immediately qualify for a pain-relieving brace at little or no cost to you by calling our 24/7 Pain Relief Hotline at 866-389-0620. Delivery is free and all paperwork is handled for you. If you are on Medicare and have knee, back, shoulder, or ankle pain, don't wait. You can qualify to immediately receive a pain-relieving brace at little or no cost by calling our 24/7 Pain Hotline now at 866-389-0620. Our representatives are standing by 24/7 to take your call and rush you your pain-relieving brace at little or no cost to you. Shipping is free and all paperwork is handled for you. Just call 866-389-0620. That's 866-389-0620. Again, 866-389-0620.
Cancer categorizes over 100 diseases. Though we do not diagnose, treat, or cure cancer, GCN team is offering the Clemson University study where there was up to a 95% reduction in cancerous cells when exposed to a plant-derived mineral supplement. If you or a loved one are searching for answers to this horrifying disease, come to GCNteam.com or call 877-878-4203. We'll email you a copy for free. That's 877-878-4203.
This is Jerome Clark, author of the UFO Encyclopedia and other books. You're listening to the Paracast.
So as we progress towards the final leg of our journey here, let me remind you that we do have a free Paracast Plus sampler at our forums at forum.theparacast.com. We have 3 or 4 samples up there where we give you a sample of the commercial-free version of the Paracast, a sample of After the Paracast, and one of the videos that we've posted. And you could check those out. And if you like what you hear, just subscribe at plus.theparacast.com. That's plus.theparacast.com. The prices start at just $4.99. Our price, cheap, has to be $4.99. What is that? Less than a Starbucks. Chris, what's a Starbucks coffee cost now? I
don't go to Starbucks. I heard they just recently raised their prices, so I think it's even less now.
So therefore, the Paracast Plus becomes an ever greater value.
Makes a great Christmas gift for your paranormal boyfriend.
Or paranormal girlfriend or whatever.
Or paranormal girlfriend or your imaginary girlfriend. I'm sure she'd like that too.
That's right. You can have an imaginary viewing. Plus.theparacast.com. We have the not imaginary Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum. I know he's not imaginary because he has his webcam on. And we know he's a real person. See, no one ever sees what I really look like. They just see this strange avatar because we don't want to let them know that. So my webcam is forever off.
Here's a good question, Gene, from Harry Newton, who's one of our listeners in the London area, London, England, where there are no Bigfoot except for occasional politicians that tromp through the countryside.
I thought we had a collection of those, but I didn't want to get into politics.
Okay. Now, you are an expert on bipedal feet. And he's wondering, with all the wonderful plaster casts, you probably have one of the largest collections in the world, I would imagine. Which one is your favorite and why?
Yeah, I get that asked frequently when I'm at conferences and have a variety of these on display. It's hard to single one out because each one has its own unique set of circumstances and often illustrates a particular point. And so I utilize many different examples to make those points. One that I was delighted to have access to was a cast that was made by Bob Titmus at the Patterson Gimlin film site, which has proved to be quite central to my modeling of the form and function of the Sasquatch foot and the distinctions that it exhibits by comparison, by contrast to the human foot. And this track has a very distinctive pressure ridge preserved within it that illustrates this function of the mid-tarsal break or the midfoot flexibility that is, it seems to be very characteristic of the Sasquatch track.
So it shows the arch, the foot arch?
Well, no, it's not arched. That's the whole point is, the tracks that Roger Patterson cast were remarkably flat looking. No arch with differential pressure under the heel and ball of the foot at all. And that caused the experts at the time, if they can be called that, at that time, back in the 60s, the study of human locomotion and footprints was, as far as evolutionary history was in its infancy. But because of the flatness of the tracks that he presented them with, it was easy for them to just dismiss them as, the result of static prosthetics, carved wooden feet, like Wallace has asserted. But the other tracks show remarkable dynamics. And again, it's not an arch, but it's due to that flexibility of the flat foot. The heel is elevated first with flexion through the midfoot, weight transferred to the forefoot, and under the appropriate conditions, plasticity of the substrate and the forward impulse, you'll sometimes get a pressure release or pressure disc.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's a release from the front towards the back?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Sometimes it actually displaces material back into the heel. Sometimes it just causes it to hump up as that downward pressure of the forefoot just displaces some of the material backward, and it
probably the faster,
like a speed bump.
The faster it walks, probably the more you're going to see that, I would think.
Exactly. It's just like when we walk down the beach, we'll push up in a similar fashion behind the ball of the foot right there at the base of our big toe, or we'll kick up some material from our toes themselves, because especially the big toe where we push off through that big toe. The Sasquatch seems to push off from the fore part of the foot in its entirety. The toes are there primarily for traction, but not so much for propulsion. And so that Titmus track illustrates that principle very, very well. But there are many others there that also show the remarkable degree of mobility of the foot in supination and pronation, the twisting of the forefoot relative to the hindfoot. And it's truly amazing. As I get talking about it, I don't know if the excitement comes through. People
it
ask me,
does, and I'm, believe me, it excites me too, because someone who knows as much about this subject of being involved in this particular type of research is, we're very fortunate to have you. And Harry wanted me to pass along a thank you on his behalf, because he's, as a result of your work and others, he has become very, very fascinated with the subject. And big thumbs up from Harry Newton in London.
Well, thank you. I was able to make a presentation to a group of podiatrists and orthopedists at the Massachusetts General Hospital for a speaking engagement. And I tell you, it was fun. It was sheer fun to be able to talk shop with a room full, 75 plus clinicians who could appreciate and were conversant in the form and function of the foot,
right,
and its pathology. In fact, I left with the department chairman another of my favorite, the Bosberg cripplefoot pair.
The crippled track. Right. Oh, that's a famous one.
That is, and unfortunately, it has a bit of a pall hanging over it because of its association with Ivan Marx, who we know hoaxed a number of different things. But in this case, as I've often said, even a blind squirrel finds a nut, and I think this was an amazing nut that he found, because discussing that particular case with these clinicians and the interpretation of the pathology and the possible trauma to the foot, I left a replica pair of those tracks with the department head, and they're on display in the office. And the clinicians were fascinated with it. They didn't have to get the qualms.
Oh man, maybe there's hope.
Anthropologists were hung up on,
I love it. From time to time, you encounter cases, and I'm sure you have too, where there's seemingly there's just elements of the case that even though trace evidence is left behind, there's something that doesn't add up. I'll give you an example. My brother had an encounter. It wasn't visual, but they were on horseback. They were on a logging road between Gold Bar and Startup, Washington, just below Stevens Pass. It was a moist day, in the Cascades.
Right.
They were on a logging road that had kind of compressed clay that was wet, and the horses all of a sudden started freaking out, and so they had to get off and calm the horses down. Then they had the smell, and they led the horses around the corner, kind of around the bend in the logging road, and they encountered 5 footprints. One was on it was going from right to left across the road. There was one footprint on the side of the road, one in the middle of the road, one on the other side of the road, a swooped footprint going up a kind of the cut in the mountainside. Right. A broken pine bough, a very large branch, had been broken, like it had grabbed it to pull itself up. But there were no tracks approaching the road and no tracks leaving the road. The track in the middle of the road was so pristine that there was like fingerprints of the foot compressed in the wet clay. that left actual dermal impressions.
Wow.
The University of Washington came up. This was in, I'm trying to remember the date. This would have been the fall of 73, I think, or possibly 74, I forget. How do you explain a trackway that only consists of 5 prints with none approaching the trackway and none leaving, where there should have been trace evidence?
Right.
Is there some sort of paranormal? I guess the question is, do we have some sort of paranormal aspect here? Some sort of being able to blink in and out of reality? I know a lot of the Forteans believe that this is some sort of paranormal creature and is not just purely an undiscovered species of animal, that there's something paranormal about it. Where do you come down with those types of theories and those types of cases?
Well, my experience has been that what appears to be a sudden start and sudden stop really isn't. That, the conditions may have been, depending on how fresh, and it sounds like.
Now, this is one of those situations where the strange creatures who manage the collection of advertising that we present on the Paracast are here to tell us we've got to stop. We have Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum with Gene and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Be sure to visit GCNlive.com today.
Attack of the Rockoids has been well received by critics and readers alike. It's a thrill-a-minute story you'll never forget. A former U.S. military intelligence officer is haunted by intense dreams about a beautiful woman pleading for his help after a terrible battle in outer space. But the dreams turn out to be true and thrust him into a telepathic love affair with a woman whose faraway planet is intent on destroying the Earth. And now the gripping tale continues in The Coming of the Protectors. It's the second book of the Rockoids trilogy, a galaxy-spanning adventure that pits our hapless heroes against powerful, fanatical enemies that threaten the lives of freedom-loving beings everywhere. Attack of the Rockoids and The Coming of the Protectors. Classic science fiction at its best. Available now. For more details, visit rockoids.com. That's ROCKOIDS.com.
Bad theater seats, cheap Halloween masks, my apartment, all things with obstructed views. Add to these large trucks and buses. 18-wheelers and large buses have big blind spots, and like my apartment, they don't always have the best view. Bus and truck drivers deal with blind spots around the entire vehicle. Always take care not to ride alongside or too close behind them. Our roads, our responsibility. Learn more at sharetheroadsafely.gov.
Fully cooked, ready-to-eat bacon. I'm talking thick, meaty, center-cut presidential bacon. Savory and delicious. I buy some, I use some, I store some. Awesome. No refrigeration needed with a 10-year shelf life. NASA-packed technology. Bacon. Fully cooked, fully hydrated, ready to eat right from the packed bacon or warm and served. Life-saving, ready-to-eat bacon. 10-year shelf life bacon. Ships free at fullycookedbacon.com. Fullycookedbacon.com.
Welcome back to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
We have Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum for several more segments of the Paracast with Gene and Chris. We're not just giving you our own questions, but asking the ones that you posed in the question bank at forum.theparacast.com. So when we broke for our last commercial break, Dr. Meldrum was going to start with a new answer to a question.
Let me just first add something. There was grass slowly rising out of the print below the swooped print on the side of the cut. So there was still grass coming up out of the print. That's how in terms of time proximity.
Right. So very fresh. So
within less than 2 minutes.
Yeah, because in some instances, I find that, the conditions where the footprints had been laid down might have been different at the time of the passing of the track maker, and those can vary, oftentimes in a very short period of time. But the question, I mean, the fact that there was grass, and not knowing the condition of the forest floor on either side of the road and the road cut.
Yeah, it'd be hard to answer that. Yeah,
it's hard to know. This was one of the criticisms that a famous tracker, Joel Hardin, a Border Patrol tracker who investigated some of the reports in the Blue Mountains outside of Walla Walla in southeastern Washington. One of his criticisms was that the tracks appeared to start and stop. And this struck me as odd, and in fact, in my opinion, just spoke to the credibility of the tracks, because here's a person who is a professional tracker, not like me. I don't consider myself a professional tracker. I'm certainly not professional, but I'm not qualified to follow and cut sign, which consists of broken blades of grass and overturned pebbles and indentations in the pine duff or what. I mean, but if there's a clear footprint, I can interpret it, infer the anatomy, infer the function, and so forth. But this individual claimed that these tracks stopped and started. Well, if it was, as he alleged, a hoaxer who was donning and doffing fake feet, he should have been able to pick up sign of that person.
Yeah, the hoaxer,
barefooted or with the hoaxer's sign. Now, I'm really hesitant and want to appeal, like I said before, to a paranormal explanation. I have a hard time envisioning or wrapping my head around the notion of what seems to otherwise to be a physical creature who would be capable of doing such things, and yet only appears where there's 16 to 18 inches of rainfall, and doesn't bother to clean up the scat that they leave behind, or that kind of everything that I'm familiar with from my own personal experience suggests and indicates a biological species, an organism that exists biologically in our plane of existence, following our rules of physics and so forth. I just don't see this as a singular entity or phenomenon that one has to, just simply because we haven't yet found the definitive type specimen, that we would be justified in resorting to a paranormal explanation.
Yeah, kind of an Occam's razor scenario.
Well, yeah. An Occam's razor that's one of my pet peeves. Occam's razor is often misused. His edict was essentially that we shouldn't add variables, we shouldn't add entities unnecessarily in an attempt to explain something. He never said that the simplest explanation is more likely to be true. And history should have taught us in both in evolution, for example, and in other areas of science, that rarely does science follow the shortest course from point A to point B. When you're dealing with historical science, like evolution, for example, there's no way to justify that, because natural selection has no knowledge of what B is. It's not prescient. It can't predict the future. And so it would have no way of knowing what the shortest distance would be to the condition that we might be experiencing in the future or right now in the present. Nature solves its problems by whatever means, and often they're very convoluted, very complicated means.
How do evolutionary biologists explain the evolution of caterpillars being able to go into chrysalis and morph into a butterfly? They still haven't figured that one out. That's pretty complicated.
It definitely is. I wouldn't resort to paranormal until I had ruled out the simpler explanations.
Right.
And one of those might be that it's just darn hard to pick up the track in the forest floor.
Yeah, in certain terrain.
That's one thing that impressed me in my first real concerted field experience, expedition, setting, was how little of the ground actually took a track very well. At least a visible, discernible footprint that I could study and pour a cast of and so forth.
Yeah.
It's very, very little surface area out there.
Yeah, that's true. And you really have to be good. I'm always reminded of that scene in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid when the tracker's tracking him over just bare rock.
Yeah. Yeah.
They keep asking themselves, who are those guys? How can they do that?
Right. Exactly.
Lord Baltimore, I think his name was.
Yeah.
Okay, some more questions from our listeners. Vespi High Folk, who's one of our top posters at the Paracast, where you can ask your questions of our guests at forum.theparacast.com, the question bank. He's wondering again about hard evidence. Now, you've mentioned scat. Do we have some stool samples from these creatures? I wasn't aware of that.
Well, yes, there have been reports from way back, the early sightings and first documentation in California back in the 50s, late 50s, of extraordinarily large but rather human-looking scat piles. There have been some hit-and-miss kind of analyses. There was one that Ivan Sanderson reported in his book where a parasitologist took a look and found the egg husks, a form of parasitic worm that was very unusual for something in North America. He was familiar with them from swine in Asia. So that was kind of interesting. I mean, what that means, I'm not quite sure. Just that it wasn't a common combination of characteristics, both.
And that was a North American sample.
That was a North American sample, yeah.
Wow, that is interesting.
We've dealt with a lot of different samples, and the problem is that we're dealing with a large omnivore. And if you're at all familiar with bear scat, for example, another omnivore, as we pointed out earlier, the appearance and consistency of the scat will differ remarkably depending on what this omnivore is eating.
Right.
It's not like, cow pies where they eat nothing but grass and straw and so forth. And so if they're eating berries, they're going to be runny and blue and have bits of berries in it. If they're in the early spring and they're eating lots of grass, then it looks more like horse manure. If they get into a carcass and they're eating a lot of putrefying meat, a lot of protein, then it's dark black and tarry. It's going to change. So I'm sure that the Sasquatch scat is going to vary similarly to that. So the only way really to distinguish it would be, an excessive diameter of that log, if you will, or with DNA analysis. And unfortunately, you have a very narrow window. You only have about, at tops, 8 hours before bacterial action will destroy any of the DNA that has come off, sloughed off with the mucosal cells on that. And so we had the proverbial perfect scat sample. I mean, I've always tell individuals, don't bother me really with these scat samples unless they're very fresh, literally located between two clear footprints. And we had that happen. There was a case in Wyoming where a Sasquatch was visiting some seasonally occupied cabins and was peering into the windows, especially the kitchen windows where dinner was being cooked. And just removed from the cabins not too far, there were two tracks with a scat pile right in between them.
Let's talk about those tracks in our next segment with Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum and Gene and Chris. You're in the Paracast. Neighbors, I want to tell you about my favorite graphics app. It's the award-winning Graphic Converter. Graphic Converter is the universal genius for photo editing on your Mac. Join over 1.5 million loyal users for this Swiss Army knife photo editing app. It gives you all you expect from a top-flight image editing app with tons of features, and most important, it's easy to use. It's also far less expensive than that other app that you can only get by subscription. You know the one I'm talking about. What's more, you can get 20% off with your order right now. So write this down to learn about Graphic Converter. Go to www.lemkesoft.de/Gene. Let me spell that. www.lemkesoft.de/Gene.
Hi, this is Sophie Winnick, longtime distributor and user of Longevity products. In the last few years, my family went through a crisis. Everything else in my life, including my business, had to be put on the back burner. Thankfully, life is getting back to normal now, but the one thing I never had to worry about was my business and my monthly commission. I've been a distributor for Longevity for over 17 years, since before it was Longevity, and I've got to say the most amazing thing about this company is the people. While my family was in crisis, other distributors stepped in and helped my customers, simply because that's what Longevity people do, even for people they don't know. For me, it has never been about getting rich. It was about a product I could stand behind, a company I could count on, and a monthly commission check that has never not once been late in 17 years. Longevity is truly a business for everyone, even people who have too much to do. I'm Sophie Winnick. I'm just like you. I have a real life, real ups and downs, but I know I will always have Longevity.
If you or someone you care about loves outdoor adventure, then check out slingbow.com for some unique holiday gift ideas. That's slingbow.com, where we have some innovative new products for the archer, hunter, or bow fishing enthusiast in your family. Now through January, use the promo code HOLIDAY to get free shipping in the U.S. or Canada. And from all of us at Slingbow Industries, have a safe, joyous, and peaceful holiday season.
Dangerous blood clot device alert. If you or a loved one had an IVC filter placed to prevent blood clots from traveling to your heart or lungs and suffered an injury, you may be entitled to substantial financial compensation. The FDA warns that IVC filters may cause serious complications, such as heart or lung damage, internal bleeding, and even death. These dangerous blood clot devices can break, and the metal fragments can travel to your heart or lungs, causing serious injuries. If you or a loved one suffered organ damage or other injuries from an IVC filter, you may be entitled to substantial financial compensation. Act now. Time is limited to file a claim. For a free consultation and free information, call Injury Help Desk at 800-478-1507. 800-478-1507. 800-478-1507. This is an advertisement. Paid non-attorney spokesperson. InjuryHelpDesk.com is responsible for this advertisement. Principal office, Las Vegas, Nevada.
The EPA says the air in our homes is up to 5 times more contaminated than outside air. The solution is not just to filter your air, but detox it. UVforlife.com now offers a doctor-recommended UVforlife.com sterilization unit to kill over 99% of viruses, bacteria, molds, and dangerous chemicals. Go to UVforlife.com. Add promo code GCN at checkout to save $100. That's UV4life.com. UVforlife.com. Don't just filter your air, detox it.
Hey, this is Marie D. Jones, the author of This Book is from the Future, and you are listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
Okay, the tracks from the creature. Tell us more.
Well, the tracks were extremely clear. I mean, they were some of the best 16-inch tracks I've seen. And we showed all of the hallmarks of midfoot flexibility that are indicative in my mind of legitimate tracks. Not likely to have been a hoax.
So they weren't side by side, but the heels dug in.
Well, where they were side by side, there was actually more weight on the fore part of the foot, as if.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So that scat sample. I was going to say these tracks were followed for probably a quarter of a mile. And then we had an independent sighting reported from that area at almost the same time, about 3 or 4 miles removed from this side, by a hiker. The scat was collected. Unfortunately, the delay in getting the word to us meant that it had been out, exposed the elements for probably a good 5 or 6 days. But we went ahead and collected it. It was roughly human in appearance. In shape, that is, a greater volume, but completely full of well-chewed-up sedges. So it wasn't a dog or a carnivore. It could have been a bear. That was the only other possibility. But the tracks it was associated with were so clear. So we went ahead and collected some, and we sent it off to a DNA lab on the off chance that it might have something. And
I bet you they just loved opening up that package.
Yeah, well, they were actually quite excited about it, especially given the description of the circumstances. Unfortunately, all they got from it was dog DNA. And what we figure had happened was one of the residents' dog had taken an interest in it and, as you might expect, lifted its leg and marked his territory. You know, this intruder had the audacity to leave a scat pile in his backyard. He was going to mark it, and so it was DNA, proteins from the urine that had
which is not good for trying to isolate DNA from an unknown primate. Oftentimes when I would go out on cattle mutilation investigations, we would allow the Pyrenees, my brother's Pyrenees, to be the first one to actually go into the site, because he would do exactly that. He would go around to and ID where any sort of coyotes had approached the carcass by peeing on the bushes that they peed on. Yes. So he was our junior investigator, the first one on the scene usually.
Right. Yeah. If we only had, well, I don't know if I would want to have their sense of smell. I think
no.
To be more of a burden than a blessing.
Yeah. Almost parts per trillion, I think. I think the bloodhounds can smell parts per trillion, and bears can too. Yeah. Bears can smell up to 5 miles away, I think. Right. Downwind. Here's, we have to get into this question. There's a couple of questions about the problem of hoaxing. And Vesby High Folk wants to know how badly hoaxers like Rick Dyer and others have harmed serious Bigfoot research. Do you think that these guys are just an annoyance, that they're just an irritation, or do you think that they're doing irreparable harm to this subject being taken seriously by academics?
Well, that's a good question, and it's I don't know that I have a clean-cut answer. I don't think it's irreparable harm in the case of something like Rick Dyer. I think that it what it does is it gives more grist for the mill being run by the ideological skeptics out there. Yeah. They like to then focus everyone's attention on those things. I mean, in the case of Rick Dyer, it's so blatantly, transparently obvious that only the most gullible or the most wishful individuals would even give him the time of day. Well, I could share some fun stories of behind-the-scenes stories of his wrangling, trying to get me to come and just take a look, just to lend credibility, to his allegations. But it was he's a character.
He did his road show. He wanted to get a place up in Flagstaff and do his dog and pony show up there, and they absolutely refused. I was hoping that they'd allow him to do it, because I wanted to go up there and do a real big expose on him, but they wouldn't even allow him to stop. They said, "Don't even stop in this town. Just keep going, pal."
Well, that's probably for the best.
How about the Minnesota Iceman? This is something that I have always been absolutely just fascinated by. Of course, Ivan Sanderson got a chance to take a look at this short-lived display of an apparent hominid in a smaller hominid, but all fully hair-covered, in a block of ice.
Yeah. Well, just recently, the volume that Bernard Heuvelmans had written on that has been translated from French into English and has been published. And it's now out and available. We just did I just wrote a book review on it for the Journal of Scientific Exploration, the JSE. Fascinating. It sort of reopened that case for me as I read this book for the first time and got Bernard's perspective in contrast to Ivan's. Ivan was probably a little more skeptical and thought that Bernard had jumped the gun. But, it really was a shell game. It was from as soon as some serious attention was directed by the FBI and the Smithsonian, then suddenly Hansen claimed that the anonymous owner, had retracted it and had replaced it with this mannequin. The mannequin, which is now down at the Museum of the Weird, I guess, in is it Arizona or Nevada? Yeah. Arizona, mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the question is, was the original that was examined at length by Sanderson and Heuvelmans, was that a real body, a flesh and bones body, or was it the model which Hansen then thought out, repositioned a little, modified perhaps a bit, and then refroze? Unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever know. And even if a compelling argument could be made one way or the other, the only physical remains we have are or is that model that's on display down there. Yeah. And certainly that is just, it's a mannequin. It's not much different than, well, it's better quality, much better quality than Rick Dyer's travesty. But it's, but we'll never know.
You're being kind.
Yeah. We'll just never know.
Yeah, it's always fascinated me, especially the diagram that Sanderson drew up, and very meticulously too, I might add, for someone just looking through glass and being able to determine as much as he did. It was very, very intriguing. You just have to wonder, maybe that thing's sitting on ice somewhere, just waiting for somebody to find it and bring it out.
Hard to imagine, but it's, stranger things have happened. So yeah, it's fascinating, but it's, there are so many fronts, so many lines of investigation that I'm involved with, and to one degree or another, that it just it doesn't justify the time to delve into it any further.
Well, maybe one of your little research assistants could put that on somebody's plate for weekend work.
The enthusiasts out there. This is tailor-made for somebody to just take a hold and chase down all those leads and talk to Terry Cullen. I got a phone call from Terry Cullen many years ago when he described his first experience. He was the individual who examined it and then brought it to the attention of Sanderson.
Let's do that further in our next segment. We've got more to come with Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum and Gene and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Be sure to visit GCNlive.com today.
There is an affordable alternative to the high cost of healthcare that offers freedom from insurance while providing compliance with the Obamacare individual mandate. Imagine having access to quality, affordable healthcare that allows you the freedom to choose your doctor and hospital. Members can share up to 100% of necessary medical expenses, including some alternative treatments. Find out how you and your family can contain healthcare costs without giving up your freedom. Go to libertyoncall.org. That's libertyoncall.org.
Looking for that edge during those intimate moments? We see many ads for enhancement, but the side effects include death. At GCN Team, we should change the Healthy Body, Brain, and Heart Pack to the Healthy Libido Pack. The brain and heart are not the only organs that require a healthy vascular system. For proper blood flow at the right moment, go to GCNteam.com or call 877-878-4203. That's 877-878-4203. That's 877-878-4203.
My computer is so slow, it's making me crazy.
I used to have that problem.
Did you quit using a computer or did you buy a new one?
No, I called Geeks On Site. They made an appointment to visit my home and showed up the same day.
You mean they didn't ask you to bring your computer to a shop? That's what happened when I called a support company.
Geeks On Site can go to your home or business or even repair your computer online. They have 24/7 emergency service.
If you are having problems with your PC or Mac, call Geeks On Site, 1-800-591-1682. Our friendly certified computer repair experts are available 24/7. Call now for a free diagnosis, 1-800-591-1682. Data recovery, virus removal, and maintenance for all laptops, desktops, printers, and networks. That's Geeks On Site for friendly certified computer repair experts, available 24/7 over the phone or in your home or business. Just call 1-800-591-1682. That's 1-800-591-1682, 1-800-591-1682.
Warning, if you're drowning in debt you can't afford, do not let the credit card companies trick you into thinking that you have to pay it all back, because you don't. What the credit card companies don't want you to know is that there's actually a way to get debt-free without paying off your entire debt or going bankrupt. If you have $5,000 or more in credit card debt, you now have the right to settle that debt for a fraction of what you owe. For free information, call Credit Associates now. 1-800-959-5759. We'll even show you how much money you could save. If you can't afford to pay off all your debt, do not let the credit card companies trick you into thinking that you have to. Call Credit Associates now for free information on how to get debt-free faster than you ever thought possible without debt consolidation or bankruptcy. We depend on your success and offer a guarantee, so there's no risk. For free information, call now. 1-800-959-5759. That's 1-800-959-5759. 1-800-959-5759.
All right, guys, we're ready for our Four Seasons sunroom, and Daddy's gonna get a rec room with refreshments.
Oh no, we'll be sleeping under the stars.
Mom, what about the one with, the fun?
Nice try, little bro. It's a gym. My gym.
Hey, Grandma's getting her Four Seasons garden room. Weather tight and still like being outdoors.
Maybe a living room. Oh no, wait, a family hub.
Yeah! No matter what the budget, the season, or the climate, Four Seasons sunrooms let you and your family enjoy the outdoors inside. Call now to hear more about these great offers from the premier manufacturer of sunrooms since 1975.
More reasons for Four Seasons now.
To find out more, call toll-free 800-848-6333. That's 800-848-6333.
Hey, this is Marie D. Jones, the author of This Book is from the Future, and you are listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
So, Jeff, you were saying that this was brought to Ivan Sanderson. Now, Ivan Sanderson died, what, in the 70s or 80s? Is that right?
Well, yeah, I can't think of I don't know the exact date.
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
Sure.
And Heuvelmann's more recently. But, yeah, Terry Cullen had brought it to their attention. It brought contact. He had been corresponded frequently with Sanderson, and Heuvelmann's happened to be there visiting when Ivan got this report, and so they went and investigated it together. But, yeah, it's an interesting description and case, but I could see it going either way. Heuvelmann does a really good job, too, of kind of threading his way through the various potential explanations. And he was a strong advocate for this kind of cloak and dagger scenario where the body was collected in Southeast Asia by a Vietnam GI who then secreted it back to the States on a military transport in a coffin or in other baggage or whatever. This was a means by which, drugs were presumably brought back to the States on a regular basis. And so there was a vehicle, a mechanism by which another form of contraband could get past customs and other obstacles. A scenario like that isn't beyond conception, but it always just amazed me why someone would think that the best way to exploit, if they were out to exploit rather than to further the science, that the best way to exploit was to put something like that out for a peekaboo for 2 bits, But I guess that was a fairly lucrative means back at that day. I guess we lose track of what you can buy with 25 cents. When I tell my kids I used to buy a candy bar for a nickel, they can't believe it.
Yeah. You can't even buy the wrapper for that now.
Right.
Well, I was hot on the heels of America's first serial killers in the 1860s. The Espinosa brothers, him and his uncle and a cousin, bushwhacked at least 40 cowboys in Colorado. Someone that's not very well known to most people. And this was over a 6-month period. The famous mountain man, Tom Tobin, was sent to collect the heads, to take them out and collect the heads so he could get a $500 reward from Gilpin, William Gilpin, who was the territorial governor. And so he got them, he found them, he cut their heads off, but he got caught in a flash flood in the Huerfano River and lost 2 of the heads. Oh. But he was able to make it back to Denver from southern Colorado with 1 head. He plunked it down on the desk and was told that there wasn't $500 in the treasury to give him to get him his reward. But Gilpin bought him a suit and took him out to dinner. And so Tobin evidently sold the head to a sideshow, and for years, many years, it was displayed in a pickle jar. the ghost, the head of the notorious, I forget his first name, but it was Ernesto Espinosa. And I tried to find out where I tracked it for a ways, but these things have a way of collecting a lot of quarters and then disappearing into the dustbin of history.
Yeah.
Probably the same thing happened with the Minnesota Iceman.
Yeah.
Probably ended up, getting tossed into a landfill or something.
Could very well have, yeah, very possibly.
Well, here's another couple of questions. We're kind of running out of time, but there's been a lot made over the years since David Pilates has come out with his Missing 411 books, which detail the many hundreds, even thousands of people that have inexplicably disappeared within national parks. There's always that kind of hint in the narrative that these people were taken by something. And, of course, the automatic knee-jerk assumption is that Bigfoot is abducting people for some reason or another, or killing them or whatever. How does that strike you? And what do you make of all these disappearances? Some very inexplicable, where the bodies are found where people have crisscrossed the area, many, many times. Piles of carefully folded clothing are found. Some pretty strange circumstantial evidence around a lot of these cases. Do you think there's any connection between Bigfoot and all these many disappearances?
I don't know if they could all be attributed to Bigfoot in a uniform fashion.
That's highly unlikely.
I think it's very possible that some disappearances could be attributed. I've dealt with a couple of instances where there was some good circumstantial evidence and even some eyewitness evidence that pointed to a unsolved disappearance being attributable to Sasquatch activity. When you look at some of the Native American traditions,
that's the King Kong narrative.
Pardon?
The King Kong narrative up in the Northwest.
Yeah,
they were 3-4 years. They give they'd actually present the Bigfoot with a fair maiden.
That's right, and there are accounts, a couple of credible accounts. One in particular that I'm familiar with fairly closely, that of a tribal woman being abducted, young woman being abducted, and coming back, a year later, pregnant, and giving birth to in this instance, giving birth to an infant that was sickly, gangly, much hairier than typical, never able to learn to speak, and died at a young age of its ills.
Wow, I never heard about that one. Whoa.
Yeah, and that one was confirmed independently by another individual that we had both ends of the story. The woman had gone off into seclusion, was sent to live with relatives out of state, and when we were doing the documentary shoot in that state, this one guy comes up, and as we're talking, he tells the story about this woman who came down from Wyoming and reportedly gave birth to this, mongrel child that was sick and died when it was about 8 years old, and it was buried up there on the hill. And it was uncanny because it was absolutely confirmed that it was the same circumstance, same time frame, same individual. He even knew the names of the person involved, and so it was interesting. So there's that possibility that, if true, speaks a lot about this question we were talking about earlier about the relatedness of Sasquatch to humans,
right?
The ability to hybridize, even if it doesn't produce a viable offspring that is healthy and vibrant. But David is very careful and stresses the point that nowhere in his book does he attribute these occurrences to Bigfoot or to any other factor. He simply is the messenger.
He's stating the facts.
To it.
Yeah, he's stating the facts to the best of his ability.
Right.
There is no evidence to suggest that is an answer for some or even any of the disappearances.
Right. But one of the names for the Sasquatch in this region is Soavitsa, which is or Soavich, which is the eater of children. And what seemed to be just so stories about snatching and carrying off infants took on a whole new dimension for me when a colleague who had worked in the Peace Corps in Africa got a job as a ranger in a park and told me that during his stint there, they had an incident that was kind of hushed up, in which a field worker's child that was bundled up down under a bush, parked under a bush while she was a few yards away tilling, was snatched by a passing chimpanzee. And before the field workers could chase it down and retrieve it, it had been dispatched and partially consumed by this chimp. Well, and then shortly thereafter, in a much more public fashion, word got out that in that area of Uganda, where they were experiencing severe drought conditions, there was a rash of such abductions, and over a 7-month period, 12 individual infants or toddlers were snatched by chimpanzees.
I'll tell you what, I don't want to be in that area. We've got one more segment to spend with Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum. I'm Gene, he's Chris, you're in
the Paracast.
Thank you for listening to GCN. Visit GCNlive.com today.
We also have swag. We have all these exclusive Paracast things that you can buy. We've got 60 or so different items, and entails t-shirts, sleeves for notebook computers, iPad cases, mouse pads, the Paracast jumbo tote bag, all sorts of t-shirts and jackets and stuff like that for men and women. We have a Paracast aluminum water bottle. All this stuff, you go to store.theparacast.com, store.theparacast.com. What makes it special is that the items are the best quality, great t-shirts, fabrics, and they have our official logo on them. That's what makes them special, in multiple sizes and colors. We even have stuff for children, stuff for women, stuff for men. We have all sorts of sizes, like small up to X large. A lot of good stuff. That's the swag from the Paracast. You go to store.theparacast.com, stop by, and take a shopping tour.
For years, you've looked for safe solutions to protect what you've worked so hard to build. How do you weather the next market correction with confidence? Now there's a way to conquer the technology hurdle and help protect your profits without buying an annuity in any market condition. Introducing WealthGuard from OnTheMarkMoney.com. WealthGuard lets you know in advance if your accounts are dropping, an early warning system that tracks all your accounts. Get WealthGuard today, 100% free. Go to OnTheMarkMoney.com. That's OnTheMarkMoney.com.
Attention citizens, this man has received national attention for accurately predicting every major financial trend, including the market crash of 2008. His name is Harry Dent, and in his newly released book, he is making even bigger and bolder predictions that have the potential to devastate the world economy and your personal wealth. You can get a free copy of Harry Dent's bestseller, The Sale of a Lifetime, containing never-before published information by simply visiting www.saleofalifetime.com/free book. Again, that's saleofalifetime.com/free book.
This is Dan Pilla. Do you owe the IRS money you can't pay? Are tax debts crippling you? I've defended people from the IRS for over 30 years. I've helped thousands, and I can help you too. I wrote the book on IRS settlement, and I'm telling you, there's no such thing as a hopeless case. Call 800-34-NO-TAX to finally get free of IRS debt. With the IRS's new programs, there's never been a better time to solve your problem. Call 800-34-NO-TAX. That's 800-34-NO-TAX, or my website, danpilla.com.
My name is Robin. I'm 47 years of age. I absolutely love One World Whey. It was about 5 years ago when a trainer told me it was the end-all of protein powders. One day when I ran out, I decided to try other brands. I spent 8 months and could not find a replacement. I went through tons of brands, types, and flavors, and almost all of them tasted unnatural and not pleasant. When it all boiled down, I came right back to One World Whey. I buy the cost-effective 5-pound container, and my family craves their One World Whey too. I look forward to and enjoy having my One World Whey and feel great after I drink it. Thank you, Synergistic Nutrition, for perfecting a protein powder in the product One World Whey. From taste to how it makes me and my family feel, you get an A++.
Call 888-988-3325 or visit
oneworldway.com. That's oneworld.com.
This is Ben Gordon, and if your teeth are stained from coffee, tea, or smoking, Power Swabs is the answer. In 5 minutes, you'll see 2 shades whiter teeth, and in 7 days, 6 shades. There's no messy strips or trays that you have to leave in your mouth for an hour. Just swab your teeth for 5 minutes, and you're done. To try Power Swabs, call 1-800-290-8480. Your bright white smile will have your friends talking about how great you look. Try it risk-free. 1-800-290-8480. That's 1-800-290-8480.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gray Alien Report, and you're listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
Dare I say it, it's been just touched at the periphery. So some people want to attribute a paranormal explanation to Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever. That they appear in window areas that tend to attract paranormal activity. But everything you're talking about is just a physical presence.
Everything, the behaviors, even this issue now of child snatching, can be accommodated within the natural behavior of great apes. There was an instance, one of my contacts on the reservation told the story that he was familiar with from his grandparents growing up in northern Nevada, where during a very harsh winter, a child was snatched by a Sasquatch. And that was probably the seed that planted this notion and gave rise to this name of snatching children. But the Tsonaquah, the cannibal giantess of British Columbia, of the Pacific Northwest, that's what she's known for.
Right, and the Wendigo, too.
Well, yeah. The Tsonaquah has these big, oversized hands depicted with big, oversized human-like hands, which she reportedly covers with pine pitch, like an NFL receiver, so she can catch the children and they won't slip out of her hands, pitches them into a basket on her back and takes them home to eat for dinner. But they usually escape because she's rather dim-witted and she often falls asleep and the kids can climb out or pick their way out through the crude basket. But there are numerous things like that where descriptions or behaviors attributed to Sasquatch have actually anticipated what we learn eventually about the natural behaviors of great apes or the fossil record of hominid evolution. Yeah. And those examples are fascinating. How would hoaxers come up with those things and be so accurate in their depictions?
Right. And why would we have these stories that go all the way back into prehistory that filter down through the generations of these wild men or in some instances, a race of shamans that decided to go back to the wild? Many descriptions, legendary descriptions in the Native American lore talk about humans that went back into a feral state and occasionally hold the tribe hostage, and they have to relinquish a maiden or for whatever reason, probably to help with the gene pool or something. But, of course, as I mentioned, the Wendigo in the Ojibwe and Anishinaabe cultures just above the border there in Canada, around the Great Lakes area, the Wendigo is the big hairy cannibal that comes through and snatches a child and races off. It would be quite unfortunate if I was hiking along in Yosemite or Rainier National Park or something and have one of my parties snatched by a Bigfoot for reasons unknown. That would be a little disconcerting. Well, let's kind of look forward now, since we're running out of time here. Where do you see this type of research progressing? What do we need to think about to further this research, and how can we convince more scientists that this is a very fruitful avenue of investigation and research, and to lose the stigma? What can we do?
Well, I think one is the recognition of this shifting paradigm in anthropology, for example, away from the single species hypothesis to what we might call a persistent multi-species hypothesis, that we have contemporaneity of species throughout history, even into the present. And once a context, once a construct within the framework, within this new paradigm takes root, then my colleagues, especially the upcoming generation, will be justified in writing a paper or doing an analysis of some of this evidence. And I see that coming. Are still very important, obviously, is the ultimate collection of either a type specimen or, short of that, a definitive DNA analysis. That's going to be challenging, I really think. If this creature is somewhere in that gap between us and chimpanzees, our closest living relative, acknowledged living relative, the gap between them and us is very narrow. Just a few percentage points difference in DNA. Sometimes you have to look hard to find those distinctions between us and them. And if you're just doing, a cursory spot check of one particular locus on a limited basis, then what are the chances that you might miss that distinguishing trait that sets a Sasquatch apart from us?
Yeah.
So I think it's going to require a dedicated researcher who's willing to invest the time with the proper funding, but to dedicate his or her time to do this completely and thoroughly in order to come to that conclusion. There is no precedent for acknowledging a new species on the basis of DNA alone. We've traditionally always required a physical specimen. But there is a growing literature now in which we find discussions of the propriety of that requirement in cases of endangered or rare species. Can we, in this day and age, now rely upon a voucher specimen of DNA or tissue or hair sample to establish and recognize a new species? And perhaps Sasquatch will be the best test case of that, to come along if we get to that point. As far as studying them, even if someone walked in with a hair strand or a chunk of skin and blood that produced definitive DNA, that would just be the beginning of the work we're going to need to do to come to an understanding of just what these things are, what these beings are. And it won't become any easier to collect that kind of data in the field. And so we're going to have to use techniques like, I'm working with a gentleman, we've acquired a 20-foot helium blimp.
Right.
That is motor driven rather than being a stationary, type of a surveillance device. It's equipped with the best of the best thermal imaging cameras that our payload capacity will permit. And we're chomping at the bit to get out there this next spring,
nice.
And start using this to do aerial surveys at night, looking for warm bodies. But then, of course, you're going to have to get in there on your feet, boots on the ground to site verify.
And a needle in the haystack, but boy, it's a real leap forward.
Well, yeah, compared to just tromping around on foot or putting game cameras out, I think it's a huge step forward. It's a necessary step forward in order to take this search to the next level.
Yeah, it's very proactive. I like it. I love the design of the blimp, too. It's real sexy looking.
Well, now, this is a different one.
Okay.
You're thinking of the Falcon project with that
right,
catamaran.
The Falcon project, right.
That catamaran style. Unfortunately, the funding never came through for that. And so in working with another sponsor, another investigator with funding directed towards this, instead of a $260,000 airship that Mr. Barnes had envisioned and his engineers had designed, ours cost probably about $20,000, another $10,000 for the camera system itself.
Wow, that's a tenth the price.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I can see a time too where we double up. This has an airtime of about a duration of about 2.5 to 3.5 hours. And so, if you have a contact, I envision us eventually having sort of a tag team strategy where the second blimp comes up and picks up the tracking while the other one comes back to camp, and we swap out the batteries and recharge it and get ready to send it out a couple hours later. And that way maintain surveillance over an area or hopefully over a target throughout the night.
I'll tell you what, please keep us informed, Jeff. It does sound fascinating that you're making some progress here, and we'll get some real answers in the very near future. Jeff Meldrum, please tell our listeners where they can find more information about what you do.
Well, I'd like to encourage the viewers to go to the Relic Hominoid Inquiry for some good scholarly treatment of the subject. That's at isu.edu/RHI. My publications, Sasquatch Legend Meets Science, can be had through Amazon, a great starting point. And I've also written a couple of field guides, the most recent of which is sort of a synopsis of these dual principles we've been discussing about relic hominoids. If you search my name under Amazon and look for Wildman, a field guide for relic hominoids. I think it'll be a good jumping off point.
You can find us on Twitter, the Paracast, on Facebook, and you can also subscribe to the Paracast Plus. The Paracast Plus offers the commercial-free version of this show, the After the Paracast podcast, selections from Paul Kimball's Other Side of Truth, audio and video. A lot more coming for the low price of $4.99 a month. You can also subscribe for a full year, 5 years, or a lifetime. We're offering some samplers over at the Paracast forums, by the way. And we have links if you check plus.theparacast.com. Go to plus.theparacast.com to learn more about the Paracast Plus. A great gift to those of your friends who enjoy real studies of strange and unusual events on the Paracast. Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum, thank you for joining us on the Paracast.
My pleasure.
The Paracast, featuring Gene Steinberg and Christopher O'Brien, is a copyrighted presentation of Making the Impossible Incorporated. Tune in next week for a new adventure in The Paracast.